Welcome, guys, to part 8 of What If an OC Reborn in KIRIGAKURE village with dual KekkaiGenkai bones, a nice release. If you enjoyed this series, drop a like down below. It only takes a second, and it's free, and while you are down there hit that subscribe button. Remember to check out the author of this fantastic fanfic. Link in the description. Having said that, let's get into it.
Hey Ross, sauce it up.
Dodo now dead in the land of snow, free from its dictatorship. The Hidden Leaf and Hidden Mist had worked together to help Princess Kyuki reclaim her rightful place on the throne. Kaga had also made a full recovery, with only his pride being hurt. Haku, Kyuki and Kimimaro had also made it out unscathed, proving themselves on a difficult mission and earning some well-deserved time off. Faina had done more than his part to ensure Princess Kyuki was placed back into power, even offering shinobi to help support her claim to power, something that had not gone unnoticed by the Hidden Leaf higher-ups. It had made things more difficult due to the princess being taken back to the land of fire by Kakashi, but he had made do, having Sandeo on his side helping things massively. All was well in the world for now, and the Hidden Mist was beginning to thrive for the first time in a long time, under his leadership, which no one now questioned. Thanks to the Hidden Mist and Hidden Leaf cooperating with the Land of Snow incident. The Hokage had offered Faina an invitation to join the Chunin exams this year around, hoping he could finally meet the new Mizukage who he had heard so much about. Although the elders and advisors had disagreed, saying that Faina should turn down his invitation, that it could be a trap. Nevertheless, Faina had accepted the Hokage's invitation, thinking it would be a great idea for his village's genin to take part in a mixed village Chunin exam to gain more experience. Now the Hidden Leaf, Hidden Grass, Hidden Rain, Hidden Waterfall and now the Hidden Mist would be taking part in the exam, meaning all sorts of young shinobi would be taking part. Faina was excited, wondering what kind of exams they would use, and if it would be similar to the manga and anime. He had already placed 3 teams who were ready this time around for the exam. Of course, the first was Team Kaga, consisting of Haku, Kimimaro and Kyuki. The next was a team of genin that consisted of one Kujiro Hoshigaki. He was a member of the Hoshigaki clan and one to watch out for. His team consisted of another member of the Mizuki clan and another genin who had scored highly on the exams. Finally was another team of Mist genin who were from no clans, but had good potential and were ready for the exam. Faina was also looking forwards to seeing the Hidden Leaf village for himself, as well as meeting the third Hokage in person, this time when he wasn't trying to kill him, he thought as he chuckled to himself. A few months had passed now, and Faina had allowed Haku and Kimimaro to rest, while also spending time with Mei and Surin and his 2 children. His son who had been named Shidoyuki was Mei's son. He was a broad baby with black hair that had small hits of red in it. His eyes were ice blue like Faina's, and he always smiled once he picked him up. Surin's daughter, who had been named Asami Yuki, had blonde hair just like her mother, but blue eyes like her father, although her hair was starting to grow a little darker as she got older. She also bore the Kagaya markings on her forehead and around her eyes. Both of them were now crawling around and proving to be difficult to manage, as they could somehow move faster than Faina could track, which was strange considering how Kyuki could move. My Faina, you might be able to teleport between your ice mirrors, but you can't keep track of your own children, Mei said laughing as she watched him chase the 2 of them around the living room. I've got you now, Faina said as he cornered Asami, getting a nervous giggle from her as she tried to get away from her father, crawling at the speed of a moving bullet towards the wall. Faina grabbed her and lifted her into the air, letting her little legs dangle as she kicked and screamed in joy. Got you, Faina cheered, getting a laugh from her. Suddenly the child sneezed and 2 bones shot out of her back and hit the wall behind her, alerting everyone. Everyone was shocked as they looked at the small bones stuck in the brick, turning to look back at the baby who was still giggling as if she found it funny. My goodness, what happened? Surin said as she ran over to take a look. Faina was very surprised and handed her to Surin. It would seem she has inherited my Shikatsumiyaku ability, Faina said looking a little concerned. But she's so young, Mei added, thinking it strange that Shud would display her abilities at only 8 months of age. I'll have to keep an eye on her, it's a dangerous ability after all, Faina said, turning to look at Shido who was sitting down with a smile as he played with some blocks. I'll be keeping an eye on both of them as they grow. He then thought, wondering about the abilities each of them could have. Not only did Faina have to worry about the abilities his children might have gained from him, he also had to worry about Kimimaro's training as a new Jinchuriki. He had heard about what happened during his battle against Runga of the Hidden Snow. Hopefully, the 3 Tails would be kinder than most, and be willing to help him as Seiken had for himself. The boys had been given a small amount of time off to relax away from missions, but Faina had still had them keep up their basic training, something he didn't have to enforce all too much, as they both wanted to continue to grow stronger. Haku had even been asking for him to show him some new jutsu, to improve, so he could keep up with Kimimaro. The days were passing fast, and soon the day of the Chunin exams would be upon them. Final had summoned the 3 squads who he would be sending to his office, wanting to give them a final brief before he sent them off. Kaga stood with Haku, Kimimaro and Koyuki in the middle. To the left was a jonin by the name of Taboto, a young jonin but an experienced one, who he had trusted to look after both the Hoshigaki and Mizuki clan member, speaking in no way a little of his ability as a shinobi. Next was a female jonin, by the name of Tommy. She was like most old-school Miss Ninja, being a little older than Final and someone he had worked with on missions before. Their team consisted of the 3 genin who had scored some of the highest points in the academy, and Final was excited to see how they would fare in the exams to come. "Welcome all," Final said as the others all bowed, showing their respect. "I hope you are all excited, as you already know you have been selected to attend the Chunin exams in the Hidden Leaf. However, please remember you will be representing the Hidden Mist, as well as myself. Therefore I want you all to do your best," Final said as he sat down in his seat. "And please try not to cause any trouble," Final said, looking at all of them with a serious glare before smiling again. Everyone gulped but nodded. "Yes, sir. Alright, I won't take up any more of your time. Make sure you prepare your mind and body for what is to come, and you will do fine. Good luck," Final then said, allowing all of them to leave feeling excited. He had already briefed the jonin instructors on the instructions he had been given by the Hokage on their accommodation and rules of the village. Meaning he shouldn't have to worry, as long as they kept an eye on the students they would be fine. All that was left now was to assemble his own escort of Anbu. He was only allowed to bring 2 bodyguards with him, not that he felt like he needed them, however, it would be good experience for them too. Now it was time to head to the Hidden Leaf himself, where he would finally meet the Hokage in person, something he was both excited and a little nervous about at the same time. "We are ready, sir," a voice said from behind. Final nodded as he turned on his chair to look at the 2 Anbu he had chosen for the job. "Alright, it's time to head out then. Alright, Kenjutsu and Kaya. It's time to move out," Final said, standing from his seat and pulling his cloak on. Kenjutsu pulled his Anbu mask off and nodded. "Yes, sir." Kenjutsu was a member of the Mizuki clan, and had proved his strength and loyalty in the overthrowing of the 4th Mizukage, having been promoted to Fina's personnel guard after. "Yes, sir," Kaya also said, removing her mask like Kenjutsu. Kaya was a member of Fina's Anbu, and had served in the battle against the Reikage and his men when they captured the 3 Tails, proving she could hold her own even against such mighty foes. She had long purple hair and pretty features. Of course, she had the pointed teeth like most Miss Ninja, but she had proved her strength, and Final felt she was right for the mission. The door opened and both Am and Ganak entered his office, bowing their head to him before they spoke. "Everything is in order, Lord Mizukage," said. "Good. I'll leave the village and you care while I'm away. If anything happens, remember the plan," Final said, giving him a nod. Also nodded. "I still wish I could accompany you," he said as he crossed his arms. Final nodded. "I don't think that would go down very well, Ao, since you have one of their Byakugan and all," Final said. Ao nodded. "You're right, I can't see that going down well either. Alright then, we had better get moving, it's a long trip to the Hidden Leaf after all," Final then said, looking to Kenjutsu and Kaya. Both of his Anbu nodded and followed him out of his office, being stopped by Ao, while Final made his way out to the village. "Make sure he doesn't do anything stupid," said to both of them before they left. Kenjutsu rubbed Tablespoon's back of his head, giving a nervous smile. "I don't think I could stop him even if I wanted to," he said. Slapped his own face as he sighed. "You know what I mean." Kenjutsu and Kaya both nodded anyway, saying they would do their best. Final walked through the village as everyone came to see him off, wishing their Mizukage farewell and good luck, shouting and screaming his name in applause. He had well and truly become the most loved Mizukage in history, having provided something that none other had been able to. Stability. "I promise, I wouldn't be away for long," he said, giving everyone a wave as he stopped at the gates. Kenjutsu and Kaya were also stood by his side, donning their Anbu masks with their faces hidden. Final turned to face the outside of the village, pulling his Mizukage hat on as he did. "Time to move out," he said as he created an ice mirror in front of him. "Follow me," he then said to his Anbu guards, looking back at them. Kenjutsu was used to this now, but Kaya was seeing it up close for the first time. Final and the others slipped out of the ice mirror into a forest that overlooked the ocean. They had traveled a full day's walk and sail across the ocean in a mere second. That's amazing," Kaya said, not believing it as she looked over the ocean. "You have no idea," Kenjutsu thought with a smile from behind his mask. "Well, come on you two, aren't you supposed to be guarding me?" Final said, already walking off from them down the path into the forest. Both of them almost jumped out of their skin as they quickly ran after him, shouting at him as they did. "Wait for us, Lord Mizukage." With that, Final and the others headed into the forest and towards the Hidden Leaf, walking at a steady pace. It wasn't too far now, being only a few hours away thanks to Final's ice mirrors. To be honest, this was pretty much the closest he had ever come to the Hidden Leaf, the last time being when the Mizukage had sent him to try and capture the 9 Tails, i.e., Naruto. And we all remember how that one played out. Suddenly a group of men made their way out of the bushes and onto the road. Faina and the others had of course known they were there the whole time, but it sensed no threat from them whatsoever. "Hey, get a load of these guys," a man said as he appeared in the middle of the road, blocking the way. 10 more suddenly surrounded Faina and his Anbu, blocking their path as the so-called leader spoke. "Look, we don't want to hurt you, but if you don't give us all of your worldly possessions, well then we might have to break you," he said, seeming sincere at the very least. Faina couldn't quite believe it. Here he was, wearing his Mizukichi hat and everything, and a group of low bandits was trying to threaten him. "Well, I guess there's a first for everything," he thought. "You insolent fool. How dare you even stand in our presence?" Kaya shouted as she stepped forwards. "Please sir, give me the order and I will kill them all," she said, turning to Faina for permission. Now, Kaya. Calm down. They don't know any better," Faina said, almost impressed that they even had the balls to do what they were doing. "My lord, please allow us to remove this scum from your path," Kenjutsu said as he gripped the handle of his sword. No. Please let me handle this," Faina said as he stepped forwards, tilting his hat over his face with his fingers. The bandits seemed confident, seeing that they outnumbered them so much. However, one of them noticed his hat, knowing he had seen that symbol somewhere before. "Hey guys, hold on a minute," he suddenly said as the penny dropped. "That hat isn't that one of those cage hats," he said, getting the others to take a closer look at it. Everyone these suddenly started to panic, unsure of what to do as they realized they had just threatened the Mizukichi. "So the penny finally drops," Faina said, chuckling to himself. "My lord, please. Allow me to kill them for showing you such disrespect," Kaya said again, keen to please and becoming more and more pissed off. "PP please. Sir, have mercy, we didn't know," the bandits shouted as they dropped to their knees, fearing for their lives as they bowed their heads. Faina raised his hand for Kaya to stop as she started to draw her sword. "Do you really mean that, or is it simply because I am stronger than you?" Faina said. No, we just were despite is all," the leader stuttered. Faina could see the poor clothing and gear that these men had, quite sure he wasn't lying. But still, if he did nothing, it would spread word that the Mizukichi was soft. What to do? Faina said as he took his time to think. Suddenly a storm of shuriken hit the bandits one by one, with shuriken even hitting each other to change their trajectory midair. Faina was impressed, to say the least, as the bandits all dropped to the ground dead, each having been hit in a vital spot. "Look out, my lord," Kenjutsu said, jumping in front of Faina and drawing his sword to defend him. Kaya did the same, each of them scouring the trees to find the one responsible. "Relax you two, it's alright," Faina said as a smile came to his face, already knowing what was happening. MK Kenjutsu and Kaya did as they were told and slowly put their swords away, watching as two hidden lead Anbu dropped from the trees into sight. "Welcome Lord Mizukichi," the small one said, banging his head ever so slight. Fiona looked the boy up and down, taking in his features. Even with his face covered, there was no mistaking those eyes. Itachi Uchiha Faina thought, finally coming face to face with the legend himself. Faina was now face to face with one of the strongest members of the Uchiha clan, someone who was well beyond his years, and cared for his village above all else. Even if he was still just a kid at this moment, he was still a dangerous opponent. "Itachi Uchiha," Faina said, looking just below his eyes, not making contact with him. Itachi couldn't hide his surprise as Faina said his name, even behind his Anbu mask. Faina then turned to the other Anbu, recognizing him too as he came into view. "And Kakashi Haddock. It's a pleasure to meet you under better circumstances this time," Faina said, smiling at him. Kakashi bowed his head ever so slightly, also remembering the last time they had met, not being surprised he recognized him. "I take it Lord Hokage sent you to escort me towards the village," he then said, confirming his thoughts. "Correct sir," Itachi said, eyeing Faina carefully, trying to get a good read on him. Kenjutsu and Kaya were confused about how Faina knew so much about the two Anbu standing before them, but they had learned to stop asking these kinds of questions, and just go with it. "Well, please lead the way," Faina then said, breaking the short silence that had followed between them. Both Kakashi and Itachi nodded, following his lead as they both turned for him to follow them. "Please, this way," Kakashi said. Kaya didn't like the look of them and kept her guard up, with her hands still on her sword, her eyes locking with Kakashi's. "Relax Kaya. Play nice," Faina said as he placed a hand on her shoulder. Kaya bit her lip but agreed with him nevertheless. "Yes sir. Besides, neither of you are a match for this pair," he then thought to himself, knowing Itachi and Kakashi were stronger than Kenjutsu and Kaya by far, especially with their Sharingan. The group now headed towards the hidden lead, with the rest of the trip being mostly silent. However, that was more due to Kakashi not knowing what to say, and Itachi not wanting to give anything away, already being cautious of Faina. He had thought about perhaps cracking a joke about the last time they had battled, but he decided against it, not feeling his audience would take it well. Soon though the Leaf Village came into view, and Faina knew that the awkwardness would soon be at an end. "Here we are," Faina then said, taking the side of the village in. "It certainly is a peaceful place," he thought as he watched the tree leaves dance in the wind, with the everyday activities of the villagers going about. "This is your first time here, yes?" Kakashi asked, almost making sure he had never been in before, knowing how strong he was. It is, Fina said, smiling at the sight. It's even more surreal than I could have imagined. He then thought. Of course, he had memories of what the Leaf Village looked like from pictures in the anime, but to see it in person was on a different level. Is everything alright, sir? Kujutsu asked, seeing that Fina had zoned out for a moment. Yes. Let's get going. Fina said, quickly snapping out of his daydream. Kakashi and Itachi continued to lead Fina and the others into the village and towards the Hokage's mansion, doing their best to keep Pit of sight. They soon came to the large red building, overlooking the stone faces of the previous Hokage that watched over the village. He took a good look, seeing the faces of some of the most powerful shinobi caved into this mountain, hoping one day he would meet them. Please this way, Kakashi said as he opened the secret door for them to enter through. Fina had guessed it was for quick passage, and also to avoid any attention from those inside the building, used only by Anbu and high-level Jonin. Fina and the others followed Kakashi inside, while Itachi remained at the rear, keeping his eyes on Fina. Kakashi soon stopped as they arrived at a door. Here we are. He then said as he slowly opened it for him. Kakashi stepped out into the room, bowing his head before he announced Fina's arrival. Lord Hokage. The Mizukage had arrived, he said, moving to the side for Fina. Fina entered the Hokage's office, taking a quick look around before his eyes fell onto the third Hokage himself. Ah yes. Thank you Kakashi. He said as he stood to his feet. He wore his standard Hokage robes, hat included as he took a quick puff of his pipe, getting up and walking towards Fina. Welcome Lord Mizukage, he said giving Fina a nod. Please, it's a pleasure to meet you in person again, Lord Hokage, Fina said, giving him a large smile. The Hokage raised an eyebrow in question. Again? He asked confused. You wouldn't remember, as the last time I was but a child amidst a battlefield. I still remember how your power turned the tide of battle that day, Fina said as he placed his hands on his hips. The Hokage sighed with a small chuckle, finding it amusing that he would say such thing. Ah yes, well, I guess that was a long time ago. And for you to have survived and become a Kage yourself, it certainly speaks for your ability after all. I too know of your accomplishments on the battlefield, he said, looking Fina up and down. Please, you flatter me too much Lord Hokage, Fina said as his eyes locked with the Hokage's, neither of them backing down. The room went silent for a moment, and Fina could feel the tension coming from everyone. Suddenly both the Hokage and Fina burst out laughing. The others looked at them strangely, before feeling the tension in the room disappear. I'm glad you accepted my invitation Lord Mizukage, the Hokage said as his laughter settled. Fina nodded. Me too, I'm glad you thought to send one. I believe it will do our young good to experience what it's like to battle and compete against other nations. The Hokage nodded. I see we are on the same page Lord Mizukage. I have to say, I did try with your predecessor. However, we could never see eye to eye, he said seeming a little sad about it. I was surprised to hear about his passing, the Hokage said, giving Fina a strange look. Yes, it was not a decision made easily, but it was necessary for our nation. In fact, that is something I would like to talk about. In private if you would allow. Fina said getting another questioning look from the Hokage as he took his pipe in his hand. Very well, he said after a moment of pause. But sir, Kakashi said, voicing his worry and speaking out of place. It's fine Kakashi. If Lord Mizukage has something to talk to me about in private then I trust him, the Hokage said. Kakashi wasn't impressed but did as the Hokage said, lowering his head as he and Itachi walked out of the room. You too, Fina said looking at Kenjutsu and Kaya. They both did as they were told, not wasting any time as they followed Itachi out of the room, going to wait in the hallway as instructed. Kaya shut the door behind her, taking one last look at Fina before fully closing it. Thank you, Fina said, not sure if the Hokage would have done as he asked. So what is it you wish to talk about Lord Mizukage? The Hokage then asked, taking a seat as he offered for Fina to sit also. Tea? The Hokage then asked as he poured himself some. Fina nodded before he sat back. Why thank you, he said before looking the Hokage in the eyes. I wanted to talk to you about who was controlling the fourth Mizukage, as well as the one who was responsible for the Nine Tails attack and the death of the fourth Hokage, Fina then said, getting a very serious glare from the Hokage. The Hokage gave Fina a very serious look as he put his pipe back into his mouth. That is top secret information, and a very serious subject Lord Mizukage, he said, taking a puff on his pipe. I understand that, but I can assure you, you will want to hear this, Fina said before he took a sip of his tea. Meanwhile Haku, Kamimuro and Koyuki were currently on board a ship that was sailing them towards the Land of Fire. They had been invited to attend the Chunin exams in the Hidden Leaf Village, having set off from the village hidden in the mist after getting prepared. The three of them were excited, to say the least, wondering what kind of tests they would be faced with. Kaga was sat with his arms crossed over his chest, watching his students as he chewed on a piece of tobacco, watching as their nerves seemed at ease. These three should have no problem with these exams. I can't think of any other genin who have experienced as much as the three of them in the whole village, he thought, remembering each of their accomplishments and strengths on each mission they had faced together. No matter what we face, we will fail, Kamimuro said, standing with the others as they looked over towards the Land of Fire that was slowly coming into view. Haku and Koyuki also nodded, feeling confident with his words. Alright you three, get some rest, Kaga said as he stood to his feet. We still have a long journey to the Leaf Village, and you will have plenty of time for theatrics later. Haku and the others turned and nodded to their sensei, each of them taking a seat, trying their best to relax their mind. We won't let you down, Fina-sensei. Haku thought as he looked over the sea one last time before he finally sat down with the others. You can't be serious, he's dead. The Hokage said, almost speechless at the information Fina had just given him. Obito Uchiha the third Hokage said, still not believing it. But why would he target the Nine Tails and kill his own sensei no less? The Hokage asked. Fina remained silent, deciding to let the Hokage use his mind to work things out a little. And Madara Uchiha, you say he can't still be alive after all these years? He was killed by the first Hokage himself. He said, almost seeming angry and worried at the same time. I know this information might seem disturbing, but we have reason to believe it was Obito who was controlling the fourth Mizukage. In fact, I can confirm it was him, as I fought him myself. Fina then said. The third Hokage sighed, seeming troubled at the news. And you're saying that it was Obito that caused the Nine Tails to attack the village and kill Minato? I am, Fina confirmed. The fourth Hokage did indeed leave me information before he died, believing the attacker to indeed be Madara. But I never thought it to be true. The Hokage said, interlocking his fingers as he became lost in thought. Why tell me this? Why do you come to me with such information? The Hokage then asked, wondering why Fina would do such a thing. Fina had to think about it himself. Could he really trust the Hokage to keep this information secret? Or would Danzo steal the show and use this information to his own gain? Could he prevent a war? Start an entirely different one? He would have to have a very serious think about what path would be best to follow. Fina also had to ask himself where he wanted this to go. He couldn't solve the Hidden Leaf's problems all alone. Was it even something he wanted to do? So much was still meant to happen that would set the chains of future in motion, with the next thing being the slaughter of the Uchiha clan. He would have to choose his next words carefully, knowing what had to be done having thought about it. I tell you this as an offer of friendship between our nations, he said, with a slight pause. Too long have our nations been at war, hating and taking petty gains, all at the cost of their citizens' lives. I believe that we should cast aside our differences and join forces. Perhaps that way we can create a world that contains less hatred. Faim said, leaving the Hokage with almost a speechless expression. Are you suggesting what I think you are suggesting, Lord Mizukage? The Hokage said after a moment to think about his words. I am, Lord Hokage, Fina said, placing his teacup down. I am offering an alliance between the mist and the leaf. What say you, Lord Hokage? Do you accept my offer? Fina then said as he crossed his legs. The third Hokage had a serious expression on his face for a moment, taking his pipe as he struck a match, lighting it and taking a large puff. Fina Yuki, the Ice Devil of the Mist. The Cage Killer and Perfect Jinchuriki. Not only did you achieve great renown at a young age, but you also killed the fourth Kazekage. Then going on to overthrow your own Mizukage, who you has swore to serve. The third said, clearly having done his homework on Fina. How can I trust someone who has killed two Kage that I knew quite well, I might add? He then said, looking into Fina's eyes as he weighed him up. I second that. A voice said coming from the back of the room, one that Fina recognized. Danzo. What are you doing here? The Hokage said, not happy at his sudden appearance. Fina had a bad feeling about this, but it decided he would wait and see what Danzo had to say. Don't be a fool, Hiruzen. We cannot trust a word the Mizukage says. He could be feeding you false information in order to infiltrate the village. He said as he came and stood next to the Hokage, using his walking cane. The Hokage didn't look impressed and crossed his arms. Danzo, what are you doing here? This is a private meeting between myself and the Mizukage, who is a guest here at my request, I might add. He said with a serious voice. To have already killed two Kage, one of which was his own, in order to overthrow him no less. Danzo said, glaring at Fina as he said it. Fina had to admit, when all of it was put like that, it sounded pretty bad. I understand your concern over my endeavors. And I understand how it looks. Killing the former Mizukage was not something I wanted to do. Fina said as he slowly stood to his feet, looking into Danzo's eyes. However, I have achieved more than any Mizukage has ever done for my village and its people. Going above and beyond to make the village hidden in the mist, as well as the land of water, thrive. He said before he turned to look back at the Hokage. I understand your hesitation about considering my offer. So I am prepared to wait for a response. Fina said, sitting back down as he crossed his legs. Why you? Danzo started. That is enough, Danzo. The Hokage shouted, causing him to go silent. I am the Hokage and this is my village. I decide what is right and what is within the best interest for it and my people. Not you, he said, glaring at Danzo. Danzo clenched his teeth in anger but held his tongue. You're a fool, Hiruzen. You always have been, he said before he slowly turned and left the room. I accept your offer, Lord Mizukage. In fact, I welcome it, the Hokage said as he turned to look at Fina, standing to his feet and extending his hand. Fina also stood to his feet, taking the Hokage's hand and shaking it in his own, as the two of them sealed the offer with a handshake. Two great nations becoming allies. I never thought I would see the day, the Hokage said. It may prove difficult at first, with so much bloodshed in our past. However, with the two of us steering the ship, I believe we can overcome any hiccups we may encounter along the way. I agree. And with the Chunin exams not far away, it will prove a great start to our village's cooperation. The Hokage said. To peace. Faina then said. Yes, to peace. The Hokage then also said. Faina let go of his hand and took a small step back. I will have to head back to my village to begin the preparation. However, I will be back in time to watch how the exams play out. Faina said. Of course, I will do the same. Besides, there are now matters that will need attending to. The Hokage said, taking another puff on his pipe as he thought about what to do next. I believe it would be best if we keep this information to ourselves for now. Perhaps waiting for Obito to make a move would be our best bet in finding him. Faina said. The Hokage agreed, knowing the troubles it would cause, not only for his village, but certain individuals too. Yes, I agree. Alright. It has been a pleasure, Lord Hokage, thank you for the tea and your time. Faina said, giving him a slight bow. The Hokage nodded his head also, in a sign of respect, before he gave the signal for Kakashi and the others to enter the room. The door opened and the four of them walked into the room, bowing their heads as they did. Alright you two, we are going back to the village, Faima said to Kenjutsu and Kaya. They nodded, surprised that he had dealt with business so quickly. Be seeing you soon. Faina then said to everyone, summoning an ice mirror as he did. The Hokage looked a little surprised as he stepped inside, disappearing before both Kenjutsu and Kaya did the same, watching as the ice melted and dispersed into the air. Itachi was also surprised, seeing that he had completely disappeared. Kakashi on the other hand had seen this before. Sir, is everything alright? Kakashi asked, looking to the Hokage as he seemed a little tense. The third looked at Kakashi, knowing how much the news that Obito was alive would hurt him. Everything is fine, Kakashi. But there is work to be done, he said, taking his pipe out of his mouth and smiling. What work is that, sir? Kakashi asked. Peace between the leaf and the mist, the Hokage said. Now that negotiations with the Hokage were over, Faina had returned to the hidden mist to start things on his end. He didn't waste time in summoning the village elders and higher-ranking officials, including the daimyo and other lords. The meeting would take place later that day. Thanks to Faina's ice mirrors, he could have everyone in the meeting as fast as they could get ready. Faina had already told Ao and Mei, who had reported to his office once informed of his arrival back in the village. Mei had of course given him an earful about him returning without telling anyone. She was, however, pleased with the idea of an alliance with the Leaf, without being less so. I'm not disagreeing with you, Faina. I just don't trust those Leaf ninja, especially those Uchiha, and that Danzo. Ao said as he crossed his arms. I understand we have a long and bloody history with Konoha. But this alliance is the start of a better change for our village. Faina said, doing his best to convince him. Ao couldn't see how, considering how well the village was already doing under Faina's watch. Still, he had never led them astray so far, and Ao owed his loyalty to him, never questioning him about the choices he made, even if they did seem strange at the time. Sometimes he swore that Faina could see further into the future than he could see with his Byakugan, always doing the strangest things that ended up resulting in great outcomes. Soon enough the rest of the elders and higher-ups of the village arrived, taking their seats in the meeting hall inside the Mizukage's mansion. All but the daimyo had arrived, and everyone awaited his arrival patiently, chatting amongst themselves as they waited with Faina, who sat at the head of one end of the table. Soon enough an ice mirror formed, signaling the daimyo had activated Faina's seal and was ready to enter. Everyone stood to their feet getting ready for his arrival, showing the proper respect. However, they were quickly surprised as a young woman walked through the ice mirror. She was dressed in a fine kimono, with her blonde hair tied up professionally, standing tall and proud. Princess Mizuko. Faina thought as he watched her walk through his ice mirror, not having seen her for a few years now. Mizuko made eye contact with Faina and smiled at him as she took his appearance in. Greetings, Lord Mizukage, she said as she gave a slight bow, locking her eyes with his. Good to see you again, Princess, Faina said, returning her bow. My father sends his regards, however, he is feeling a little under the weather, and asked me to come in his stead. I hope that is alright, she said, not taking her eyes off Faina, something Mei noticed as she cocked an eyebrow at her. That's not a problem, Princess, I trust your judgment in our nation's matters, Faina said as he looked to everyone else, making sure no one had a problem with that. He then offered her a seat down at the head of the other side of the table, where her father would have been seated. Now that everyone is here we can begin. Faina then said as he leaned on the table, interlocking his fingers. I would now like to inform you about a recent meeting that I had with the Hokage of the Hidden Leaf, he said, getting the attention of everyone. We have both agreed that it would be in the best interest of both of our villages to enter a peace treaty, and by extension an alliance, Faina said, waiting to see the reaction of the others. It took a moment before anyone spoke up, the first being one of the elders of the village. Belief cannot be trusted. How could you agree to such a thing before consulting us? He said. Faina had expected this kind of reaction from some of them, and was prepared to let them voice their concerns to him. Others slowly started to pipe up, some agreeing with the elder, while others defended Faina's actions. Ao and Mei, who were also present for the meeting, both grew angry with the petty squabbling, and Mei were about to speak up. However, someone beat her to it. Please tell me, elders, when was the last time you achieved anything for this village, or our nation? The princess said, causing everyone to fall silent. The elder slumped back into his seat, deciding to shut his mouth, as he had no argument to lean on. I thought not. The princess then said. Lord Mizukichi has the full backing of my father in the Land of Water. If he thinks this is the right thing to do, then who are any of you, who have not been able to accomplish anything close to what Fina has in only a few short years? Who are you to stand against him? She said, looking everyone in the eyes as she dared anyone to disagree with her. Fina smiled at her words and stood to his feet, getting everyone's attention. Thank you, Princess Mizuko. As Mizukichi, I must protect the village and its people. Everything I do is in regards to that duty. I ask you to trust my decision at this time, and of course, I ask for your loyalty. Everyone nodded, knowing they couldn't disagree with his track record of strange decisions having paid off, speaking for itself. I know our history with the Leaf is not tremendous. However, this will open up a new age of peace between the two of our nations. It is time to put the bloodshed behind us, and look to the future. Everyone agreed, remaining silent before the princess too stood from her seat. It's settled then. I shall inform my father of your actions and leave the rest in your capable hands, she said, giving him a smirk. Thank you, princess, and please give your father my regards, Fina said before he summoned an ice mirror for her. Princess Mizuko nodded and made her exit, leaving them alone before the ice mirror faded. Does anyone else have anything to say? Ao added, making sure there was nothing else. Nobody spoke up, and Ao was happy to bring the meeting to an official close. Very well, that concludes the end of this meeting. He then said for the official end time of the meeting to be noted. Fina thanked everyone for their time, knowing that not everyone was happy with his decision. He only hoped that it was his track record that kept their confidence in him, and not his power. Although needed, he didn't want to rule through fear like the other Mizukichi before him. Soon enough everyone left, leaving Ao and Mei alone with Fina. I'm glad that it's over with, Fina said as he turned to Ao and Mei, breathing a sigh of relief. Mei suddenly walked up to Fina and pinched his ear, squeezing hard. What the hell, Mei? He said as he felt the pain explode through his face. And when did you become all friendly with the princess? She said as she let go, placing her hands on her hips. Fina gave a nervous laugh as he tried to defend himself. Wait, it's not like that, Mei, he said, waving his arms around. Ao could have slapped himself in the face as he watched the pair acting like children before him. If you two are done, he said as he cleared his throat, getting their attention. We should take the necessary steps to put this new agreement with the Leaf in place, he then said. Mei nodded, turning professional once more as she turned to face him. Fina rubbed the back of his head, laughing a little before he too got serious again. Yes, Ao, you're right. I'll leave that to you though, he then said, getting a surprised look from both of them. I have some things I need to keep an eye on at the moment. Can I leave the details for you to oversee? Fina asked as he turned to Mei and then Ao. Mei couldn't stay mad at him when he looked at her with his puppy dog baby blue eyes. What on earth could be more important? Mei asked, giving in to his request. That's a secret, Fina then said, giving her a wink. Mei sighed as she gave in. Fine, but at least go and see the babies before you disappear on another of your adventures. Fina laughed before he stepped closer to her, kissing her. Don't worry, Mei, I'll stay out of trouble, he said, holding her. Mei nodded back to him, smiling as she hugged him before she let him go. I hope so, she said before she watched him slip into an ice mirror. Ao remained silent with his arms crossed before he turned to Mei. We had better get started, this could pose quite a lot of paperwork for us, he then said, getting an angry vein to appear above Mei's head. That man. I swear I'll make him pay when he comes back. Welcome to the village hidden in the leaves, a hidden leaf ninja said to Kaga and the others. Tomimuro, Haku and Koyuki stood at the gates of the hidden leaf, looking through at the village in wonder. The gate guard had checked over their paperwork, seeing they were here for the up-and-coming Chunin exams. Once approved, he handed them a map and a set of keys for the apartment they would be staying in. Kaga could tell the guard was a Chunin himself, and that he was nervous in dealing with them. Kaga understood, after all, the Mist and Leaf had been involved in many conflicts over the years, and many still held a grievance over the bloodshed. So this is the Leaf village, Koyuki said, seeming impressed by how bright and warm it appeared. Haku also took a good look around, seeming impressed by the number of people coming in and out of the village. Tomimuro on the other hand couldn't believe the lack of security around, thinking how slack the place seemed so far. Alright you three, let's get a move on and find where we are staying, Kaga said, leading the way. The three nodded, following him through the village. They could feel the strange looks they were getting from some of the villagers as they saw their headbands, but it was to be expected. After all, they were ninja from a foreign land. Still, they were guests of the Hokage, and as such, they were left to their own devices. Though Kaga could feel eyes on them, knowing full well their movements would be under surveillance by the Anbu Black Ops. Kaga was sure that the others hadn't noticed and would keep it to himself, not wanting to worry them. The four of them made their way through the village, eventually coming to their apartment that was located on the far side close to the river. The place was nice and had 3 rooms, more than large enough for all of them. Kaga was also sure that the other teams from the Mist Village would be arriving shortly. After all, the Chunin exams started tomorrow, and he doubted they would be late. It was still early, and Kaga didn't fancy sitting indoors all evening, deciding they should head out and get some food, even offering it as his treat before the exams. Haku and the others jumped at the chance, and the four of them got ready and made their way out. They headed into the village, making their way to the center walking along the main strip. It was filled with all sorts of people and travelers, offering stalls and stand from all over, each selling something different and unique. Haku could smell meat grilling mixed with the scent of barbecue, while Kyuki could smell fried squid and grilled prawns. Kaga laughed as they tried to agree on what they wanted to eat, with Haku and Kyuki not being able to come to a decision. "Hey, watch it," a voice suddenly shouted, getting everyone's attention. Kamimuro and the others turned around to see a small blonde-haired kid running through the street, not watching where he was going either as he was about to crash right into Kamimuro. The kid's eyes opened wide at the last second, as he hadn't realized Kamimuro was standing in his path. "Look out," he shouted as he closed his eyes, getting ready for the impact. However, no such thing ever came, and instead, the boy tripped over, opening his eyes in surprise to see that his face was hovering an inch off the floor, with Kamimuro holding the back of his t-shirt, stopping him from hitting the ground. The boy opened his eyes wide looking around for the item he had dropped, wriggling to be let free as he panicked he had lost it. Kamimuro dropped him once he started wriggling, letting him shoot back to his feet quickly, as he stared down Kamimuro with an intense look. "Hey, watch where you're going," he said before he noticed Kamimuro's headband, realizing he was a shinobi. "Who the hell is this kid?" Kyuki asked, laughing at his appearance. "I am Naruto Uzumaki. And one day I'll be Hokage," he shouted embarrassed. The four of them looked at him in even more surprise this time, not sure what he was on about. "Hey, you. Hold it right there," a man suddenly shouted as he spotted Naruto from around the corner. Naruto almost jumped out of his skin before he looked into Kamimuro's eyes one last time. Kamimuro picked up the mask up off the floor and threw it to him, showing he wasn't so bad, even smiling at him. Naruto couldn't believe it and was almost lost for words at the kind gesture. "Whatever. I'm out of here," he shouted as he turned away and ran, leaving Kamimuro and the others standing there confused. "Who the hell was that kid?" Kyuki said as she placed her hands on her hips. Kamimuro couldn't place it, but something inside him was telling him there was more to that kid than met the eye. "Hey, come on Kamimuro, we're going to eat without you if you don't hurry up," Haku shouted from the distance, getting his attention. With that, Kamimuro headed off with the others to get some food, letting the thought pass out of his mind as the night grew late. The next day came quickly for the three genin, with the day of the Chunin exams finally falling upon them. Kaga had given them one final good luck before he escorted them to the building where they would be starting their exams. "Remember, you three, work together and there is nothing you cannot overcome," Kaga said, wishing them good luck as he watched them enter the exam building. The three of them nodded and bid their sensei farewell as they walked into the building, heading inside and down the corridor where they eventually found their destination. "What do you mean we can't go in?" someone said. Haku could see three genin similar in age to himself standing before two larger-looking shinobi, who looked to be blocking their access to the door. "Sorry Pipsqueak, but no losers are allowed to enter the Chunin exams," one of the larger shinobi said, crossing his arms over his chest. Kamimuro and the others walked over, seeing that the room they were blocking was the room where the first exam was being held. "What do we have here?" "Kiri Ninja. We don't want you kind around here, get lost," one of them said, causing Kyuki to grow mad. "Why you?" she said, making a first. Haku gave an awkward smile as he placed a hand on her shoulder to calm her down. Now Kyuki, it's alright," he said. Kamimuro remained silent as the two looked him up and down, getting a strange feeling about him. "Besides, can't you see the transformation jutsu they are using?" Haku then said, causing the two larger shinobi to look at him in surprise. The other three, who were hidden leaf genin, also looked confused before the other two smiled and undid their transformation jutsu. "You've got sharp senses, kid," one of them said with a smile as he stood to the side, while the other simply examined the three of them with interest. Kyuki was mad at herself for missing such simple things, and swore she would pay more attention starting now. "Come on in," the two then said as they opened the door for the sixth genin, allowing them entry into the exam hall. Haku, Kamimuro and Kyuki walked in to see that the room was already full of ninja hailing from all sorts of villages. All of them glared daggers at the three of them as they weighed them up, seeing whether or not they would make easy prey. "Looks like this is the place," Kyuki said as she too glared daggers at them, also judging them based on their appearance, trying to pick anyone who she thought might be a threat. Shinobi from the hidden leaf, grass, waterfall, rain, snow and finally mist were present and accounted for. And it had seemed their presence from the other mist genin had not gone unnoticed as they eyed each other up. "Hey look, it's Kujiro Hashigaki," Haku suddenly said as he gave him a wave of his hand. "What the hell are you doing?" Kyuki said as she slapped his hand down. "You trying to make us look soft," she said, scolding him. "It doesn't matter what the others think of us, all that matters is our own ability," Kamimuro then said, finally saying something. To their surprise, Kujiro waved back before he headed over to them with his teammates. Kujiro was large for his age, having a stocky build similar to that of a sumo wrestler. He was a member of the Hoshigaki clan and as such, shared their shark-like features, also having long black hair that was tied back. Well, if it isn't Lord Mizukage's favors, he said as he walked over to them, speaking through his shark-like teeth as he stared at Kamimuro, not taking his eyes off of him. Chill, Kujiro. No need to get all heated just yet. One of his teammates said as she took a sip of water from her bottle. Her name was Shikamzuki, a bright girl with long black hair and blue eyes. Long time no see. Koyuki, she then said, as she looked her up and down, inviting challenge. Koyuki did the same as she too looked her up and down. Chika, she said, noting falling for the bait. Lastly, Haku and the final teammate whose name was Rakuro no exchanged greetings. Rakuro was a handsome guy, with short brown hair and green eyes. He had scored high in all of the final tests in the academy, even though he belonged to no clan, he was strong in his own right. It's been a while, Haku, he said, giving him a smile. Haku nodded. I hope you have been well, Rakuro, Haku said as he nodded his head. I hope you aren't thinking you'll have an easy time during the exam. Yo, you might be the Mizukage's favorite, but we won't lose to you. Kujiro said. Kamimuro didn't say anything and instead turned to his own teammates. Come on, Yuka eyes, let's go and find somewhere to sit, he said, walking right past Kujiro, causing his blood to boil. Why you? Don't ignore me, he shouted, letting his Hoshigaki blood get the better of him. However, Chika flicked his ear, calming him down. Chill out. We will have plenty of time for that later. For now, let's not give too much away, she said, guessing to the entire room of shinobi that was watching them at that very moment. Kujiro realized what she meant and calmed down, doing his best to keep a level head. I hate that guy. He thinks he's so cool, he said under his breath. Rakuro smiled as he crossed his arms over his chest. Looks like the others are also here, he said as he looked over to the other team from the hidden mist. Kujiro and Chika looked over, smiling as they saw them. Looks like the old class is back together. Suddenly the doors burst open as a large bald man with a large black trench coat entered the room, demanding everyone's attention. Alright, you sorry lot. Take your seats, the exam is about to begin. Take a number and take your seats, the large man said, his voice booming across the entire room, getting everyone's attention. Everyone did as he said, taking a number from the front of the classroom, and then sitting down in a free space wherever they could find. Haku could already see that the tables had been lined out in an exam order, already expecting some sort of written test. My name is Ibiki, he said, introducing himself as he crossed his arms behind his back. Kamimuro took note of the scars on his face, already being able to tell that this man had been involved in war, and his fair amount of bloodshed in the past. Welcome to the Chunin exams. I trust each and every one of you has been told what to expect. Well, I'm here to tell you otherwise, he said as a large smirk on his face appeared. This will be your first test and first exam as part of the Chunin exams. There will be no battle or any fighting of any kind, without the permission of one of us proctors, is that clear? Disobey and you will be disqualified immediately, he said, watching each and every person's reaction in the room with his cold and calculating eyes. One of the other instructors suddenly pulled out a large sack of paper, giving them a wave as he smiled. You will all take one of these tests, also taking one's pencil and one rubber each, he said as the instructors started to hand out the test paper. This test will consist of 10 questions. You will not start the test until you are told. You will not write on your paper until you are told, unless you want to be disqualified, he said as he walked back and forth, explaining the rules, while the genin watched the large amount of instructors sat surrounding them, keeping a close eye on all of them. You will also be sitting this exam as a squad, he then said, getting a mixed reaction from all. If any one of your teammates scores 0 points, then your entire team will fail the exam. Another mixed reaction spread over the large group of shinobi in the hall, some more confident than others, with most starting to panic over the thought of letting their teammates down. Ibiki put his hands into his pockets, before he pulled a piece of chalk out and started to write on the blackboard. Here is how this whole thing works. You will each be given 10 points from the start of the exam. For each question you get wrong, you will have a point taken away, he said, letting the information sink in. As I said before, you will be sitting this exam as a squad. So the results on whether you pass or fail will be determined by the overall score of your teammates. However, if one person on your team scores a 0, then you all fail. And finally, if any of you are caught cheating, you will be deducted 2 points for each time you are caught. Therefore, it will be possible for you to be kicked out of the exam before the time is up. Now I will say this. To be caught cheating as a shinobi is disgraceful and dishonest. Make sure you are not caught, he said with a serious look in his eyes. Now everyone was really starting to sweat, thinking how shameful it would be if they stopped their teammates from passing the exam, because they couldn't answer the questions. Kamimuro could understand the pressure of the exam, but he had faith that Haku and Koyuki would be fine, knowing all he could do was trust in their ability. Thankfully, Haku and Koyuki had the same idea, with neither of them feeling worried. So does anyone want to give up yet? Ibiki said, waiting to see if anyone would take the bait from the start. Alright then. You have 1 hour to complete the questions, with the final question being given at the 45-minute mark. You may begin, he said, giving them the signal to start the exam. The entire room fell silent, except for the sound of paper turning and pencils being picked up at the desk. Oh, and don't forget to write your name and number on your exam, Ibiki said, placing his hands back into his pocket. Everyone flipped their exam paper over, taking a good look at the questions. Haku did the same, taking a quick look around the room, seeing the instructors watching everyone like a hawk. Guess we shouldn't try to cheat unless we absolutely have to, Haku thought as he looked at the first question. Haku studied the paper, reading the first question and what it was asking him to do. Looks like a coded text. This shouldn't be too hard, he said with a smile. Kamimuro did the same as he read through the questions, having already deducted that the questions only got harder the further down the page you got. He was happy he could answer the first 5 with his own knowledge, however, the rest was beyond him. Knowing the only way he would be able to answer them would be to find someone who had already done them and cheat, the only question was how. 15 minutes had passed now, and the room was starting to get warm. Koyuki had answered most of the questions she felt able to answer. But now she was starting to get stuck. Not good. At this rate, I might have no choice but to number 44. You're out. One of the instructors suddenly shouted, cutting her train of thought off. Well, what? But I didn't. The genin protested as he tried to argue his point. Suddenly a kunai flew across the room and hit his desk. Get out or you will be forced to leave, Ibiki said, only warning him once. After that both his squad members stood up, and the 3 of them left the exam hall, setting an example for the others. Koyuki could see that someone had already been caught cheating, and had been thrown out of the exam, along with his whole squad, deciding she would hold off on cheating for now. Haku had made his way through to one of the lower questions, having had no trouble with most of them so far. This one is an integrated problem based on predictions of uncertain conditions and dynamic energy analysis application, he said to himself, impressed by how difficult the questions had become. This really is some high-level stuff. Haku thought, already knowing he would be able to answer this, but was unsure if Kamimuro and Koyuki would be. Number 57. You're out. Another of the instructors shouted, kicking out another squad for cheating. Number 88. Gone. Another said. No way. I didn't do it, he shouted. This time 2 instructors dragged him out by his arms and he kicked and screamed, showing no pride whatsoever. The time had passed at a steady rate now, leaving only 10 minutes until the final question to be revealed. More and more had been removed for cheating, and now about just over half who had started were left. Haku had now finished all of the questions and was sure he was right. All that was left was to help Kamimuro and Koyuki copy his answers without getting caught. However, if all of them got a total of 10 points each, take away 2 points each for cheating only once, they could still come out with a total of 24 points, meaning a pass was still highly achievable. Alright, Haku said, happy with his decision. Haku slowly made a hand sign under his desk, allowing a small ice mirror to form above his paper. One which he had also created above Kamimuro's and Koyuki's so they could see his answers. Kamimuro was impressed and quickly copied the answers down onto his paper, already having clocked that one of the instructors had noticed their actions. Never mind, Kamimuro thought, knowing it was only 2 points. Koyuki looked at the ice surprised. That Haku should have known he would be able to answer all of these questions, she said as she copied them down. 33. Fails. 67. Fails. The instructors continued to shout while Ibiki smiled as he watched them all tried their best to get the answers any way they could. Haku, Kamimuro and Koyuki weren't the only ones who had managed to figure out how to cheat. Fujira and his squad had also managed to cheat, with each of them finding their own way to do so far being lucky to not have been struck out. Bakura was smart like Haku, and had no need to cheat, however, Kujira lacked in the academic area of study, with his strengths lying in combat. Thankfully Chika had used her Hazuki clan jutsu to help him and herself cheat, copying the answers from another shinobi who had already finished the exam. Alright, listen up. It's time for the 10th and final question. Ibiki suddenly shouted. Everyone stopped what they were doing and looked up at him, waiting to see what he would say next in anticipation. But before that, I'm going to add one last rule for this final question, he then said. Let me explain. These are hopeless rules, he said, waiting to see everyone's reaction. But first you will have to make a choice. A choice on whether to answer the final question or not. What do you mean we have to choose whether to take the final question or not? Someone shouted, not sure what was going on. Ibiki simply smiled. Here it is. If you choose not to answer the final question, then you fail the exam, along with both of your teammates, he said with a smirk. Everyone in the room was shocked, including Haku and Kamimuro. But surely that means everyone here will choose to answer the question, Koyuki said, unable to contain herself. Ibiki smiled again, placing his hands into his pockets. The condition to the final question is if you are unable to answer the 10th and final question, then you will never be allowed to take the Chunin exams again, he shouted, getting in complete and utterly shocked expression from everyone in the room. You can't be serious. Yeah, that's not fair, some of the students shouted. Ibiki started laughing. You have 2 choices. You either test your luck and knowledge as a shinobi who is worthy of becoming a Chunin, or you choose not to take the final question and come back next year. Who knows, you might even have a different examiner who gives you an easier time next year, Ibiki said, toying with their heads. The room was suddenly split into debate as everyone started to wrestle with their own doubts and worries on if they would be able to pass or not. The pressure of them never being able to take the Chunin exams again, being stuck at Genin for the rest of their lives added in for extra effect, also added to the weight of their decision. Now raise your hand if you do not wish to take the final question, Hibiki said, watching and waiting to see who would chicken out. A brief moment passed as everyone in the room thought about the outcome, not knowing whether to take the risk or not. I can't. Someone suddenly shouted as he stood up and raised his hand. Hibiki's eyes narrowed in on the first one to give in, watching as more followed in his stead. Me too. I can't risk that, another said. Kamimura looked at Haku and Koyuki, seeing that Haku was calm, however, Koyuki seemed a little flustered. He could also see that the other Miss Genin were in a mixed state, with Kujiro looking like he was very flustered. But Kamimura knew he was not one to back down over anything, knowing he would never be the first one to give up. Soon enough everyone who didn't want to take the risk had left, leaving only those who were brave enough to take the risk left. Very well. It looks like you are all ready for the final question, Hibiki said as took one hand out of his pocket. Everyone waited in intense anticipation, unsure what it could be, not even able to guess at how extremely complex it might be. Alright, you all pass, Hibiki suddenly shouted, getting a surprised look from everyone. What, you all pass? Hibiki shouted, surprising the hell out of everyone who was left inside the classroom. We pass. Just like that. Someone shouted, not believing it. Hibiki smiled as he placed his hands back into his pockets. As a shinobi, it helps to be smart. It also helps to be able to conduct covert ops without being caught. Even such an act as cheating on a test, for example. The students had figured as much, having only survived this far by not being caught too many times. However, a true shinobi must have the guts to endure any challenge that they face, even if that means their life, he said, letting his words sink in. Hibiki could see that more than a few genin in the room had already seen and faced death, some more than once. I think this will make for an interesting exam this year, he thought as he liked the look of a few individuals. Anyway, report to this location for 1400 hours sharp. Your next test will be explained to you there, Hibiki said before he watched some of them slowly exit the room. Kanemo took a look at the time, seeing it was currently 12 p.m. Meaning they had 2 hours before they had to report to the location. That being said, they had given no direction and no map, meaning you would have to find the place yourself. Kamimura regrouped with Haku and Koyuki, smiling at them. How did you both find that exam? Koyuki asked. It was hard, not impossible, but still difficult, Kamimura said. Quit thinking on that ice mirror to help us, Koyuki then said to Haku. Haku nodded. Don't worry about it. I was confident in my answers and thought you could both use a hand. Even if they caught us, it was only classed as cheating once each, something we could afford to do, Haku said. Kamimura and Koyuki both nodded. Glad to see we think on the same page, Koyuki said as she placed her hands on her hips. Haku nodded. We had better not waste any time and follow someone who knows the location of the next exam, he then said. Kamimura agreed, having already targeted a group of Hidden Leaf Ninja. It was a safe bet after all, with it being their village, they would know it like the back of their hand. Let's move out, he then said as they got ready to leave. Hey, where you three off to? A voice suddenly asked. Koyuki and the others turned to look who it was, seeing Kujiro and the others on his team. Chika and Akuro. Should have known you guys wouldn't have been outed so easily, Chika said as she stopped in front of them, sipping her water bottle. Haku nodded, happy to see they had also passed the first exam. We can all take the exam together, he then said, extending his hand. Don't lump us in with you lot, we won't help you pass, and we won't lose to you, Fujiro said as he slapped Haku's hand away. Haku didn't show any expression and took his hand back, understanding why they wouldn't want to team up. Don't listen to him, Haku, we wouldn't be helping you three either, Koyuki said as she came to his defense. Chill, Fujiro, Chika said, getting his attention. Besides, these aren't the only three we have to worry about, she then said as she looked over to another group of 3 Miss Shinobi. Fujiro looked over to them, noticing who it was he was looking at. Hitori Toitomi, he said under his breath. Kamimura and the others also looked at him and his squad, noticing he was with 2 fierce-looking female shinobi, all of who looked to be older than themselves. Chika took another sip of her water bottle, watching as the 3 Kiri ninja walked out of the classroom, giving Fujiro and Kamimura a serious look. See, we can't be making enemies when we already have so many, she then said, feeling to be wary of this Hitori character. Rakuro agreed. Rumor has it, Hitori is an excellent swordsman, and even has his name down to be entered for selection of the new 7 ninja swordsmen, he said, getting a surprised look from the others. Whatever. We won't lose no matter who we face, Kujiro then said, barging past Kamimura and Haku as he made his way to the exit. See you at the next exam, he then said through his sharp teeth before he walked out. Chika smiled, giving a wave before she followed suit. See you there, she said following her teammate. Rakuro did the same thing, giving a nod to Haku and the others, acting nicer than his teammates before he followed them and left the classroom. Do you know anything about the other 3? Kamimura asked, after seeing the look in Hader's eyes. Koyuki shook her head, not knowing anything, but Haku nodded. I have heard his name before. I believe he and his squad were held back from the last Chunin exam due to their sensei being killed on one of their missions, Haku said. I believe others have already said they are all on or above Chunin level already, and that this exam would be easy for them. Komimuro and Koyuki both looked surprised at the information before Koyuki punched him in the arm. Is there anything you don't know? She shouted, getting a small laugh from Haku. With that, the three of them decided it was best if they left and made their way to the next exam location. Sometime later, Haku, Komimuro and Koyuki had followed the others to the second exam location. The task hadn't proved too difficult, seeing as how quite a few other teams had passed the first exam. They had arrived at the outer perimeter of a large forest, labeled the Forest of Death. Everyone waited at the main gate that was sealed shut, locked with chains and seal tags, making it look even more foreboding. Everyone seemed to be waiting patiently for what was going to happen next, some looking more nervous than others. Everyone kept to themselves, staying within their own teams, not sure what the next exam would entail, deciding it would be best not to interact with anyone else. Komimuro used this time to scan the others, trying to figure out who might pose a threat as he looked at the competition. His eyes moved from person to person before a strange shiver ran down his back, forcing him to spin around, a little too quick. Komimuro looked up, seeing that it was Hattori Toyotomi, stood directly behind him, taking him by surprise, as he had not noticed his presence at all. When did he? Komimuro thought that he took a good look at him. He was tall, very tall. Standing at 6'1", wearing a metal head protector, like the second Hokage, with black hair that had auburn streaks running through it. Komimuro also noticed his eyes were each a different color, one being a light misty blue, and the other being gray. So you are Komimuro, Hattori said as he looked down at him. I am, Komimuro replied. Haku and Koyuki both watched from the sidelines as the standoff between them began, not going unnoticed by others around them. But as quickly as it started, it finished. Be seeing you, Hattori suddenly said, breaking eye contact and walking past Komimuro with a grin, leaving him wondering where he stood with him. It would seem that due to himself and Haku having been adopted by Fina, it had formed some sort of jealous notion from other genin, who also wished to gain the approval of the strongest Mizukage and hero of the Land of Water. Meaning they had a lot of rivals who wanted nothing more than to crush them. I don't like the look of him, Koyuki said, feeling a killing aura surrounding him, knowing he was trouble. Don't worry Koyuki, Komimuro can handle himself, Haku said, smiling at her to put her at ease. However, he didn't like the look of him either, and would be keeping an eye on him from now on, he thought as he watched him walk away. Alright you lot, liven up already. A voice said coming from above them, snapping everyone out of their daydreams. Everyone looked up to see a woman with purple hair eating dumplings while sitting on a fence. Are you ready for your second exam, because you could die? She said with a menacing tone in between mouthfuls. My name is Anko, and I'll be your instructor for the second exam. Anko jumped down from the fence, landing with cat-like elegance before she bounced back up to her feet, allowing her coat to swish for effect. Anko was a busty woman with purple hair and a cocky attitude, but Komimuro could tell there was more to her than met the eye. Right then you punks, listen up. I'm only going to explain this once, she said as she picked her teeth with the dumpling stick before throwing it at a tree. Everyone watched and listened, waiting to see what the second exam would entail, already feeling nervous. Alright. For this exam, you will be working in your 3-man cells. Each squad will be given 1 scroll, she said, holding both the Heaven Scroll in one hand and an Earth Scroll in her other. You will have 5 days to acquire both scrolls and make it to the building at the center of the forest. How you get those scrolls is up to you. By simply gaining both scrolls, that does not mean that you pass the exam, that also goes for if you lose your scroll. Remember, the goal is to make it to the center with both by the 5th day, she said, allowing a moment for the atmosphere to change as everyone realized what she insinuated. You have all had to sign a liability waiver before participating in this exam. So death is not unexpected. The forest holds many danger, and if you're not on your guard, then you will die. As I said, reach the center of the forest within 5 days with both scrolls to pass the exam, and try not to die, she said, not seeming bothered if they lived or died. Oh, and one last thing, she then said, turning around before she placed her hand on the gate to undo the seals. You must not open the scrolls and look inside under any circumstances until you reach the finish line, that understood? She said, watching them all nod slowly. Good, she then said, finally opening the gate to the forest. Now each team come and take a scroll. You will each enter the forest with a 5-minute time between entries, only to give you all a fair chance. After that, the rest is up to you. Haku had already done a headcount for the number of teams that were present. He counted a total of 20 teams, 60 genin in total, including his own. Meaning each squad would have 1 scroll, meaning only a maximum of 10 full sets would be available. That was if they even gave an even number of scrolls out in the first place. Koyuki was looked at the others with a serious expression, getting a nod from both of them as they too understood how dangerous this could be. But the nature of the exam and the scrolls not guaranteeing a pass or fail, even if you lost your scroll, other teams could set ambushes around the finish line to steal them at the last moment, meaning you were not safe even up to the finish line. Alright, first squad step up, Anko said as she began to hand out 1 scroll to each squad. Once each squad had a scroll, some being quick to hide the identity of theirs, while others were less so as everyone tried to clock who had what. Alright, first squad enter, Anko said, allowing the first squad of Chunin, who was from the hidden grass village, to enter the forest. They entered the forest, looking a little nervous, but quickly disappeared into the thick tree line in dark setting. The time seemed to pass slowly, yet it came fast all the same. Now only half of the squads remained, with another being given the go-ahead to enter, each of them trying to make a strong start as they dashed off as quickly as possible. Screams could also start to be heard coming from inside the forest now, as battles between squads, either with each other or the monsters within, had begun. Kimimaro watched as Kujira and his squad were next to enter. Kujira locked his eyes with Kimimaro's for a moment, giving him a smirk before he entered the forest. "See you in there. We won't lose," he shouted before the three of them disappeared into the forest. "What's plan, you two? What should we do?" Kyuki said, not seeming worried, but wanting to have a level head between the three of them. "I think it would be best if we either went around, taking our time to assess the situation, rather than be dragged into a conflict that could involve more than one squad," Kimimaro said, coming up with a plan rather quickly. Haku agreed. "The last thing we want is to engage in battle right from the start," he said, nodding his head. Kyuki also agreed. However, she couldn't help pout a little as she crossed her arms. "I still think it would be easier to just kill another squad and steal their scroll from the get-go, but I'll play alone for now," she said, wagging her finger. Haku couldn't help give a light-hearted laugh, whereas Kimimaro kept a serious expression on his face, watching as Hattori and his squad also entered the forest now. "Kimimaro, hello, you in there?" Kyuki said as she waved a hand in front of his face. Kimimaro snapped out of it quickly, seeing Kyuki standing in front of him. "Sorry, Kyuki," he said. "We should keep our distance and head towards the center of the forest. I don't want to waste any time," Kimimaro said, getting serious all of a sudden. Kyuki was a little taken off guard as Kimimaro was usually so laid back. But this time he wasn't playing around. Haku also noticed his tone, knowing he was right. This wasn't the time to be playing around. "It's time to get serious," Haku said as he placed a hand on Kyuki's shoulder, agreeing. Kyuki looked into his eyes, seeing the determination coming from him, knowing the look well. "You're right. Let's do it. Alright, you three, it's your turn. Hurry up and get a move on, will you?" Anko said as she turned to look at Haku and the others. Anko couldn't help but notice the serious look in their eyes, almost getting a smile out of her. This year's Chunin seemed very interesting, especially these Miss Brats, she thought, examining the three of them. "Alright team, move out," Kimimaro said to the others, leading the charge as they burst forth into the forest at full speed. The Chunin exams have begun. Kimimaro, Haku and Kyuki all charged into the forest of death, heading deep into the thick and dense jungle. They could already see that this was no ordinary forest, and that it contained many dangers hidden beneath the surface. The screams of some of the other students could be heard as sounds of battle echoed in the distance. Yet, they did not waver in their mission to head towards the center, not allowing anything to distract them from their goal of passing this exam. Kimimaro led the charge, guiding them through the trees and darting off each branch. Haku and Kyuki followed suit, each doing their best to keep an eye out for any dangers that might come from their flank. "So far so good," Kimimaro said as he came to halt, giving the signal for the others to also stop. "No sign of anyone this far in, should we not set an ambush?" Kyuki said. "Not yet. We should keep moving forwards. Once we reach a certain distance ahead we will be able to take our pick of any others that come our way," Kimimaro said. Haku nodded, knowing it made sense. After all, if they could get there first, they would have first dibs on any other team that made it, being able to steal their scroll and escape to the finish line in an instant. However, that also meant the enemy could do the same, giving an equal risk to their plan if an ambush didn't work. Kimimaro took a good look around, feeling that something was off. He didn't have to say anything as Haku caught onto the feeling quickly, also sensing the danger. "Look out," Haku suddenly shouted as a storm of kunai flew at them from above. Thanks to Haku's quick reactions, he was able to get a dome of ice up, shielding them from the attack, and stopping all of the kunai in their tracks. "Guess it's plan B then," Kyuki said as she pulled a kunai from her weapons pouch, spinning it around on her finger, not being able to help smiling as she said it. Kimimaro nodded, knowing this was certainly a possibility. However, it was already something they had planned for. Haku let his eyes melt away, giving the three of them a clear view of their surrounding, as they tried to locate their attackers. "Guess they don't want to come out," Kyuki said, keeping a ready stance. "It's not that they don't, it's that they can't," Haku then said, having located them already. "What do you mean?" Kyuki said, not understanding. Suddenly a scream coming from a set of bushes not far from them got her attention. All fell silent not long after, and the three of them waited to see what was going to happen. "It's him," Kimimaro said, watching as the bushes rattled before a dark figure made its way through. Kyuki looked the person up and down, recognizing who it was as he slid his sword back into its sheath slowly, letting the noise get everyone's attention. "Hattori Toritomi," she said, keeping her guard up trying not to look shocked. Hattori looked at the three of them with a killer gaze in his eye, wiping a small splash of blood from his cheek before he disappeared. "Sorry about that," he said, taking them by surprise with a sudden cheery smile. The bushes behind him rattled again as both of his teammates came into view, each of them with a large grin on their face, and one of them holding a heaven scroll. Well, look who it is. One of the girls said, looking Haku and the others up and down. Our luck just got even better. She then said, licking her lips before she pocketed the scroll into her weapons pouch. Are we really going to fight with them after we just got the scroll we need to pass? The other girl then said, not seeming bothered in the slightest, crossing her arms as she yawned. She had long black hair that was tied up in a bun with 2 bangs hanging down either side of her face. She also had a blue scarf wrapped around her neck with the metal mist symbol on it, chewing on a strand of it as she looked unimpressed. Why wouldn't we? If we take them out now, it saves us a job for later. The other girl said, clearly having more energy than her teammate. She had shoulder-length red hair, sharp fangs and a killer attitude to boot, something she wasn't afraid to hide. Calm down, Miyako, Hitori said as he looked to the Redeed. Yuri is right. There is no need to fight them here and now. We already have what we need, and besides, I want to crush them in a more public setting. He then said as he stared into Kamimuro's eyes, inviting challenge. Haku couldn't help notice that the 3 of them seemed strong. In fact, he could tell that if they were to fight right here and now, it would certainly be a lengthy battle, with both sides taking serious wounds. You think we will just let you get away? Koyuki said, raising her weapon, not backing down. Don't bother Koyuki. Let them go. Kamimuro said as he placed a hand on her shoulder. Koyuki turned around and gave Kamimuro a pissed-off look, however, Kamimuro did not back down. Now is not the time to fight with them, he said, getting her to settle down. Hitori also smiled at his words, itching to do battle with them himself, yet being able to control his emotions. He is right, now is not the time nor the place, he said before he turned his back. Besides, I think you have other things to worry about. Kamimuro had a puzzled look on his face, not realizing what he meant until it was almost too late. Kamimuro, look out. Haku shouted, only having seen the danger at the last second, before a rain of explosive tags littered the area. See you on the other side. Hitori shouted just before the kunai exploded, disappearing into the smoke along with his team, leaving Kamimuro and the others to deal with the new threat. Where the hell did that come from? Koyuki shouted as she burst out of the dust, landed on a tree trunk, and using her feet to stick to it as she scanned the area. Haku did the same, but was now a bit of a distance from the others, knowing that whoever had attacked them had succeeded in splitting them up. Look out. Haku shouted as another volley of kunai wrapped with explosive tags flew at them, exploding against whatever they made contact with, further pushing the 3 of them away from each other. Die. A voice shouted, coming from behind Haku. Haku turned around, seeing a kunai swipe towards his neck, as his attacker finally came out from the shadows to try and finish the job. However, Haku couldn't move fast enough, and the kunai stabbed into his neck, cutting deep and getting a smile from the enemy. That's one down. The hidden grass ninja said, watching as Haku's body fell to the ground. You're right. That is one down. Haku said as he appeared behind the grass ninja, taking him completely off guard. The clone. He shouted, trying to retreat as he had completely let his guard down. However, it was far too late for that as Haku returned the attack, slitting his throat just like he had tried to do to him. Haku landed a perfect blow, watching as his blood fired out from the gash in his neck, knowing that it would all be over for him in a matter of seconds. Meanwhile, Kamimuro's opponent had fancied his chances in a head-on battle, not wasting any time to jump out and attack him, clearly favoring his hand-to-hand combat ability. Little did he know, he stood no chance against Kamimuro's skills, with his attacks seeming to fall short, never quite going the distance to make contact. Why you? Stay still. The hidden grass shinobi said as he tried to punch him again and again, feeling like a fool as he grew desperate to land a blow. Kamimuro was growing tired now, dodging another punch and ducking under a spinning heel kick with ease. I'm sorry, but I don't have time to waste on you anymore, he said as he caught his opponent's punch in the palm of his hand. With one swift motion, Kamimuro pulled his arm, taking him a step off balance and closed the gap, thrusting a bone blade through the center of his chest, landing a clean blow in not even a second. The grass ninja was wide-eyed with shock as he coughed a large amount of blood out of his mouth, falling to his knees before he took his final breath. Kamimuro looked at him for a moment before turning back to where the others were waiting for him. Any problems? He asked as both Haku and Koyuki walked over towards him. Yeah. They have the same scroll that we do, so all of that was for nothing, Koyuki said as she showed them the scroll. Kamimuro nodded before he looked at Haku. No. They were not strong enough to pose a threat, Haku said as he crossed his arms. Good. Let us continue with the plan and get to the center, he then said, turning around and jumping into the air. Both Koyuki and Haku followed him again, with the 3 of them kicking it up a notch as they jumped into the trees, moving at a much faster pace than before. Sometime later, the 3 of them had made a good amount of time up now, knowing that they didn't have much further to go until they reached the center of the forest. So far they had only encountered Hattori and his squad, and one squad from the hidden grass. Although, there was no telling how many of the others had either been killed or eliminated from the exam already. There was also no telling how many squads had already gathered both scrolls. All that remained was for them to now steal a scroll from another squad, something they didn't want to waste any more time with. We should split up. Really? Kyuki said, not knowing whether or not it was a good idea. Haku had come up with the idea of having the three of them split up, that way they could cover more ground. Once they found another squad, they would contact the others and wait for backup. I agree, Kimimaro said. Kyuki frowned but guessed it wasn't such a bad idea and would help them save time. So far only 1 hour had passed, and even though they had plenty of time, the three of them wanted to do Kaga and find out proud by finishing as fast as they could. Alright, let's move out, Haku said, giving the order before each of them darted off in a different direction. Haku headed north, Kyuki headed west, and Kimimaro headed east, heading towards the center of the forest where the finish line was. The plan was a simple one, and one that Kimimaro hoped would not turn into a dangerous task. Haku jumped and darted around, moving swiftly through the trees, and he did his best to stick to the shadows and remain unseen. He knew they had agreed on reporting back to each other on their findings, but he was also sure that if he could take out his squad alone, he would do just that. As luck would have it, he didn't have to travel far before he came across a squad of Hidden Leaf Ninja. The squad was comprised of 2 boys and 1 girl, all of who were sat around a small campfire by a stone bed that sat next to a large stream of water. Haku slowly got closer as he kept his presence concealed within the bushes and trees, not giving away his position as he waited and watched, trying to gather more information before he acted. How can they be so stupid? Not one of them is keeping watch for an enemy attack. They have an open fire and are sitting and joking, as if they have no worries in the world, Haku thought as he watched, knowing that the 3-leaf ninja before him was a joke. If I strike quickly using the water to my advantage, I could easily take them off guard and disable all 3 of them in an instant, Haku said to himself, drawing a handful of senbon needles as he went over the plan in his head. Now, he said as he was about to move. However, something beat him to it, and he quickly commanded his muscles to freeze, keeping his position and not getting in the scene. Water style, crashing wave. A voice shouted, taking the 3-leaf ninja off guard, causing them to panic, as the water from the large stream suddenly formed a wave that crashed down into them, smashing them off the rocks and into the bank. Haku watched as none other than Kujiro walked out of the tree line, his hands on his hips, as he gave the 3-leaf ninja a serious glare. Chika also slowly appeared from the water, having used her Hazuki clan abilities to become one with it, before she took solid form again, walking onto the stone bank. My, that was way too easy, she said, brushing her hair from her face. The leaf ninja had gotten up now and had taken a fighting position, drawing their weapons as they tried to ready themselves. Give us your scroll, or you can die, Kujiro said. I'll only say it once. He then added, giving them a moment to think about it. No way. The leader of the leaf ninja said, pointing his sword at Kujiro before he spoke again. A hidden leaf went back down to you bloody Miss Scum. He then shouted. Haku could see the look on Kujiro's face. He's going to wish she hadn't said that. He thought, knowing how much it still pissed some Miss Ninja off to be called that. Then die. Kujiro said as he charged in towards the 3 of them, letting his anger get the better of him. Chika sighed as she watched from the distance. He always just charges in like he is invincible or something, she said as she crossed her arms. The crow dropped down, landing next to her, knowing there was no longer any point in remaining hidden now that Kujiro had charged in. You know how he gets, Chika, he said with a small chuckle. I just feel sorry for those 3 now. He then added, watching as the fight played out. Kujiro had charged head in towards the 3-leaf ninja, not even drawing a weapon, as he raised his fist into the air getting ready to strike. I don't think so, the leaf ninja said, ducking under Kujiro's punch and slashing through and across Kujiro's large body. I got him, he shouted, giving the signal for the others to attack also. Take this. The other boy shouted as he jumped in and kicked Kujiro in the ribs, trying to break them with a powerful roundhouse. The girl also attacked using her kunai as she jumped into the air, landing behind him before he stabbed it into his back. The 3 of them quickly jumped backwards to gain some space, waiting to see how their attacks had fared against their opponent. Did we get him? The girl asked, not knowing what was happening. The others were also on the same page as they were not sure either, seeing as Kujiro was just standing there and not moving. Is that all you've got? Kujiro whispered. Is that really all you have? He then shouted as he raised his head into the sky laughing. I'll kill you all without breaking a sweat. He suddenly shouted as his blue eyes became red and like a wild beast, he charged in for the kill. Kujiro suddenly moved like a tank with a jet engine, grabbing the face of one of the boys, before he slammed his head into the ground taking him out in one shot. No way. How is he so fast? The other boy said, jumping back as he started to make hand signs. Fire style, fireball jutsu. He shouted as he landed, skidding across the wet stone and unleashing his fire style attack. Kujiro let go of his first victim, and turned to look at the fireball that was heading right for him, simply smiling as it got closer towards him. The fire style hit, exploding on contact and creating a large black smoke cloud, blocking everyone's vision. I got him. The leaf genin shouted as he let his guard down. Haku was still watching from the shadows, seeing how the fire style had made direct contact, and wondering how Kujiro had dealt with it. He got his answer as Kujiro suddenly burst from the smoke and slammed his fist into the boy's face. The power behind his attack was so strong that it broke his neck with a single strike, sending his limp body flying into a tree where it crashed through before bouncing into the forest like a ragdoll. Kujira had a sinister smile on his face as he turned around to look at the last member of the squad he had just killed. "You're next," he said as he let his razor-sharp fangs show through his smile, putting such terror into the girl that she dropped to the ground, falling on her knees. "And no, please sir here. You want the scroll, right? Take it," she said as she pulled out her team's scroll, presenting it to Kujira, praying that he would take it in exchange for her life. Kujira now stood over her, his red eyes slowly turning blue again, as his color aura faded away. "Was that so hard?" he said slowly as he took the scroll from her hands. The girl was trembling, not even wanting to look him in the eyes as he took the scroll from her. But Haku could tell that was simply a front. "Did you really think I would just give you the scroll?" she subtly said as her face turned to that of a twisted look for vengeance. "You will die for what you have done," she shouted as the scroll in Kujira's hand suddenly ignited, revealing that it was a fake scroll filled with explosive tags. "Kujira, look out," Chika shouted as she started to form hand signs to make a water wall to protect herself and Kuro from the explosion. However, Kujira didn't seem too bothered at the fact the scroll was about to explode, with the blast most likely killing him and the leaf genin at the same time. "You shouldn't have done that," Kujira said as his eyes turned red once more before he placed the scroll inside his mouth and swallowed it whole, getting a shocked look from the leaf genin. The scroll exploded from inside Kujira's stomach. But instead of his body being ripped to pieces, his stomach and belly simply grew very large, along with his checks, before a large amount of black smoke burst out of his mouth and nose, as he could no longer contain it. Slowly Kujira's body shrank back down to its normal size, as he placed his hands on his stomach, letting out a large burp of fire unleashed from his mouth before he closed his it and pulled a funny-looking face. "That tastes awful," he then said, spitting onto the ground. Haku couldn't believe what he had just done, deciding to keep watching as he hoped to find out more about Kujira's abilities. The leaf genin was shocked as she had watched her final plan be broken into nothing. Kujira turned his attention back to her one last time, putting his serious face back on. "But how did you survive that?" she asked, having given up all hope. "That's my little secret. Now hand over the scroll," he said as he picked her up by the scruff of her clothing. The girl was already defeated and handed over the real scroll this time, having accepted her fate. Kujira took the scroll and threw her to the ground, not bothering with her anymore. "Thanks," he said, taking one last look at her. "If you hurry, you might be able to save your friend there," he then said, looking to the ones he had slammed into the ground. He then turned his back on her and walked over to his teammates. "Let's get out of here, the work is done," he then said, getting a nod from both of them. Haku watched as the three of them jumped into the trees, leaving the scene and the leaf squad behind. Haku was pretty impressed after what he had seen and known that Kujira would not be an easy opponent to defeat. "I guess I had better get back to the meeting point. Hopefully, the others had more luck than I did," Haku then said, slowly disappearing into the shadows and leaving. Kamimura was currently heading east, hoping he could track down another squad who would have a scroll for them to steal. As he jumped through the trees, he couldn't help think about Hattori and his squad. Kamimura could tell that he was strong, and wondered just how strong he was, becoming excited at the prospect of battling him in the future. The sound of battle seemed to catch his attention as he landed on a large tree branch, taking cover behind the trunk before he took a good look below. From what he could make out, a squad of hidden grass genin were currently fighting the squad from the hidden waterfall, with all three of them engaged in what looked like an intense battle. Each squad consisted of 2 boys and 1 girl each. However, Kamimura could tell that the hidden waterfall was gaining the advantage, as their movements seemed more coordinated and their teamwork more precise than the hidden grasses squad. Kamimura watched the battle play out, and soon as he had predicted, the hidden waterfall shinobi had emerged victorious, demanding the scroll from the hidden grass, rather than just killing them and taking it. The genin from the hidden grass did as they asked, knowing it was better to live to fight another day rather than die. "This could be my chance to strike," Kamimura thought as he watched him reach for his scroll, eagerly awaiting which one their team had, as he tried to formulate a plan that would allow him to take them all down and steal the scroll. The grass genin finally pulled out his scroll, tossing it to the hidden waterfall ninja and waiting for their response. Kamimura could see that it was a heaven scroll, just what he needed. "Alright, time to strike," he said as he got ready to go on the offensive. His plan was pretty simple, with the 3 hidden waterfall genin being solely focused on only the 3 grass ninja before them. He was certain he could attack the 3 of them at once with a surprise attack, and take them off guard, giving him enough time to steal the scroll and get out of there. "Alright, time to attack," Kamimura said to himself, crouching down as he let his chakra flow into his feet to boost his speed. "Man, you gotta be kidding, another heaven scroll. We already have that one," one of the waterfall genin said as he sighed, resting his hand against his forehead. The one in the middle and the one who looked like the leader studied the scroll for a moment before he too sighed. "A deal is a deal, get out of here," he said, looking at the 3 defeated grass shinobi, allowing them to whimper into the forest and escape alive. "Should we really have let them go?" the girl asked as she took a step forwards, having both of her hands behind her head seeming relaxed. She had long black hair with 2 bangs on each side of her face. She also wore her headband around her neck. "They aren't a threat to use anymore, Hina," the leader said, pocketing the scroll as he turned around to look at his squad. "Besides, it might come in handy to have a spare scroll." he then said with a smile. Suddenly Kamimuro appeared in the middle of the three of them, seeming to have moved much too quickly for any of them to be able to react. Sorry about this, Kamimuro said as he suddenly allowed blunt bones to fire from his body, hitting all three of them at the same time with his surprise attack. His attack hit Hina dead on, resulting in knocking her out with a single strike. The other boy had been able to react at the last second, managing to let the attack hit an unvital spot and rolled back, recovering. The leader of the group thought it seemed to move much quicker than the others, even being able to draw kunai and block Kamimuro's bone attack, jumping back and getting space from him. Hina, he shouted, looking to his teammate before he shifted his focus back to Kamimuro, keeping his kunai raised. Who the hell is this guy? The other boy asked, looking at Kamimuro like he was a freak after watching his bones retract back into his body. Keep calm, Akio. The leader shouted, knowing that Kamimuro could have killed both of his teammates at that moment if he had wanted to. I take it you want the scroll. He then asked, knowing there was no other reason he would be here. Let's get him, Boten. Akio shouted from the other side of Kamimuro. However, he was quickly hushed by Boten as he raised his hand for him to stop. I don't want to kill you. Just give me the scroll and I will be on my way. I know you have to, Kamimuro said in honesty. Boten had black spiky hair, wearing a black jacket with green cuffs and outlining. Kamimuro could tell he was stronger than the other two, knowing he had already assessed the situation, as well as his battle strength from only a few moments. Boten lowered his kunai and smiled. Take it. I don't want any bloodshed today, he said, tossing one of their heaven scrolls to Kamimuro without putting up a fight. What the hell are you doing, Boten? Akio shouted, not understanding. Kamimuro caught the scroll, taking a quick look to make sure it was real. Thanks, he said as he slowly reached into his weapons pouch, taking out his squad spare Earth scroll and tossing it to Boten. Really, you're just giving us an Earth scroll? He asked as he caught and examined it. Kamimuro couldn't help smile. It's a fair trade, he then said before he suddenly vanished, dashing off into the distance. Akio rushed over to Boten, not believing what just happened. Why the hell didn't we attack him? He then asked, watching as Boten pocketed the scroll and headed over to check on Hina, who was just coming back around. Come on, Akio, you must have been able to tell that kind of a fight would have resulted in one of us dying right there, Boten said as he slowly picked Hina up, letting her come to on her own. Akio was pissed off that he wasn't strong enough to do anything in the situation, clenching his fist in anger before he helped Hina up too. What happened? Hina asked as she finally woke up fully. Don't worry, Hina, we got an Earth scroll, and no one got hurt, Boten said. But who the hell was that guy, Boten? She then asked, the memory of what had just happened to flash in her mind. I'm sure we will meet whoever that was again soon, and hopefully we get another shot at him in the future. But for now, let's just get to the finish line without anyone dying, Boten then said, flashing both of the others a smile. Meanwhile, Kyuki had gone west, also in hopes of finding another squad with the scroll that they needed. So far she had made quite a bit of ground, and she was getting to the point where it was time to turn back. How have I not encountered another squad yet? She said to herself as she jumped from tree to tree, using her chakra control to easily traverse the terrain. Hopefully Kamimuro and Haku have had better luck, she then said, landing on a branch that suddenly snapped, not being able to take her weight. Kyuki fell through the air, dropping down towards another tree branch. However, as she did, a sudden sense of danger washed over her, noticing a huge snake that had suddenly appeared, waiting for her to fall into a striking distance. Kyuki didn't like the look of the snake, and quickly pulled out a kunai and rope, throwing it at the tree before pulling tight, catching herself and swinging out of the way of the large predator. That was a close one, Kyuki said as she watched the snake sliver off into the forest, wondering why it had given up so quickly. A scream sounded from the direction the snake had traveled to, most likely having already sensed an easier target. Looks like another squad is fighting that thing off, Kyuki said as she jumped higher into the trees, so she could get a good vantage point. Maybe the snake will do my work for me, she also thought as she finally laid eyes on what was happening. A team of Hidden Leaf Shinobi were currently doing their best to fight off the snake, however, struggling in their attempt as the creature was rather large. Kyuki, Haku, can you hear me? Kamimuro's voice suddenly said, coming through the small earpiece they had on so they could communicate with each other. Kyuki placed her hand to her ear, pressing the small button on it so she could talk. Kyuki, reading you loud and clear. A moment later, Haku's voice also came through. Haku, also reading you loud and clear. A moment passed before Kamimuro spoke again. I have both scrolls. I repeat, I have both scrolls. Meet back at the meeting location, he said before he cut the transmission. Kyuki smiled as she slowly stood up, suddenly no longer interested in the squad fighting the large snake below. I should have known he would have found another scroll. Oh well, time to get back then, she then said, watching as the snake suddenly swallowed one of the ninjas below, as his teammate screamed in horror. This exam really is no joke, she said, not taking pity on them before she turned her back on them. Not long had passed after Kamimuro had contacted the others before they had regrouped. They each reported their findings, with Haku telling the others about Kujira and how he had defeated a whole squad with relative ease. Kyuki said she didn't have anything worth reporting and was happier about them having acquired the remaining scroll they needed. Let's not waste any more time and get to the center. I'm sick of this forest already, Koyuki said as she placed her arms behind her head, resting it on her hands. Komimuro agreed. Let's get going then, he said, not wasting any more time. Haku also agreed, and with that they started to make a move towards the center, aiming to finish the exam in good time. Only 4 hours had passed since they had entered the forest, having been given a total of 5 days to complete the assignment, something that seemed like too much time to the three of them. However, after seeing some of the other squads in action, they could understand that not everyone was as strong or as skilled. Soon a large building at the center of the forest came into view, and the three of them quickly headed towards the large doors at the front of it. Haku was on full alert as they approached, knowing that if another squad was going to attack them, it would be now. But no attack came, and the three of them entered the building without any challenge whatsoever. Well, that was easier than expected, Koyuki said as she took a look around. Haku also agreed, doing a quick scan of the area. It would seem so, however, we are not alone, he then said as he sensed others inside, not having to wait long until the sound of footsteps could be heard. The three of them looked over to where the sound was coming from, seeing that none other than Hattori and his teammates were walking over towards them. Well, look who made it. Miyako, the one with red hair, said as she placed her hands on her hips. We still beat you though, she then said as she crossed her arms over her chest. Like that matters, Koyuki said, not letting her get one up on them. What did you say? Miyako suddenly said with a snarl. That's enough, Miyako, Hattori suddenly said, cutting her off before he looked at the three of them. I expected nothing less of you three. After all, everyone expects big things from the two adopted sons of the Mizukage, as well as the daughter of Lord Forth. Haku could sense that the three of them were not the only ones here already, being able to detect 6 others, along with 2 Jonin-level shinobi. Were you the first squad to arrive? Haku asked, wondering who else was here so far. No, Hattori answered. But I think that is enough chit-chat for now. Perhaps you should open your scroll, everything will be revealed then, he then said as he turned around to walk away. Yuri, who had remained quiet, also turned around and walked away. However, Miyako remained in front of them, eyeballing Koyuki with serious intent to kill. See you around, daughter of the monster, she then said, referring to her father. Koyuki suddenly drew a kunai and was about to attack her in a blind fit of rage. However, Miyako had been expecting such and was ready for it. Come get some, she shouted as she was about to counterattack, drawing her own short blade, as the two of them were about to go at it. Suddenly, in the blink of an eye, both Haku and Hattori had appeared before both of them, each stopping their attacks before they went too far. Hattori had half drawn his blade, blocking Miyako's attack, giving her a serious look as she told her to stand down. Haku, on the other hand, had formed a layer of ice around his hand, allowing him to grab Koyuki's kunai and stop it. Calm down, Koyuki. Now is not the time, he said with a rather serious expression of his own, not a look he usually displayed. Koyuki bit her lip before she turned around and stormed off, leaving Haku and Komimuro alone with Hattori and the others. Whatever, Miyako then said as she took a step back, laughing as she watched Koyuki walk away. If you ever say that to her again, I will kill you, Haku suddenly said, slowly turning around to look at the three of them, a deadly feeling washing over all of them. Even Komimuro had to admit, this was very unlike Haku, and he knew when he became serious like this, he was extremely dangerous. Miyako could feel the killing intent coming from Haku, cleaning her teeth as it almost made her feel afraid. However, Hattori didn't seem fazed at all, simply smiling as he looked into his eyes. Whoa there, big guy. A simple misunderstanding, Hattori said as he put his sword away. Besides, I would like to see you try, he then said, also getting serious, and the two of them locked eyes for a moment. Be seeing you, Hattori suddenly said as he broke eye contact with Haku, turning around before he gave a small wave. Don't forget to open that scroll, he also shouted from the distance as Haku and Komimuro watched the three of them walk away. Haku calmed down before he turned around and started walking off to go and find Koyuki, with Komimuro following him. Are you okay, Haku? He asked. I'm fine. It's just, you know how she gets about her father, he said, looking at Komimuro. I know, Komimuro said, deciding now was not the time to talk about the subject. Both of them found Koyuki, who still seemed pissed off at what had just happened, deciding to ask if she was okay. Are you alright? Komimuro asked, seeing that she was still worked up over it. It's fine, she said, knowing it would do her no good getting any anger over it. We should focus on the mission, she then said, looking up at both of them, getting a nod. I believe the orders were to open the scroll once we reach this location, Komimuro then said, taking out their scroll, letting all emotion become forgotten as they each looked at the scroll. Haku and Koyuki also nodded in agreement, remembering the briefing they had been given from Enko. Very well, let's see what's inside, Komimuro said as he undid the clip on the scroll with his thumb and gripped the paper, getting ready to open it. Koyuki and Haku seemed a little nervous, with Haku already thinking that it could be a trap. But they also knew that orders were orders, having been told to open the scroll only when at the finish line. Here we go, Komimuro said as he quickly pulled the scroll fully open, waiting to see what was inside of it. A sudden burst of white smoke took the three of them by surprise, as they waited to see who or what the dark figure was that had emerged out of it. Kaga-sensei, the three of them suddenly said, seeing who it was that had emerged from the smoke. That's right, you three. Good job on passing the second exam. I had no doubt you would succeed. He then said as he gave them a thumbs up. Kyuki looked confused, not knowing why their sensei had been sealed inside of the scroll, to which Kaga simply laughed. You see, Kyuki. The aim of the exam was to get here with both scrolls. However, if any squad was to break those orders, giving in to temptation and open a scroll before that, then their sensei or another jonin like myself would appear and knock out all three of them, resulting in them failing the test. Kyuki nodded in understanding. And look at the time, I hardly had time to get comfy with the three of you finishing so quickly. He then said with a smile. So now what? Haku asked. Now we wait for the rest of the squads to finish the exam. The only problem with that is we still have another 4.5 days to wait now. He said with a sheepish expression on his face. So we will find out the next stage of the exam until all the other squads make it here, Kamimura asked. That's right. However, teams of jonin have been sent out into the forest to keep tabs on teams who have either been killed or rendered unfit to carry on with the exam, meaning we might not be waiting the full 5 days. Kaga then said. We also can't leave this place. After all, the next part of the exam will be held here, so you had better get comfy. He then added. The three of them nodded in understanding and agreed with their sensei. I guess all we can do is wait then, Haku said. Kamimura agreed, however, a large rumbling sound took them by surprise, and both of them looked to Koyuki, who had a surprised look on her face. Oh no. She said as she placed her hands on her stomach. The four of them started laughing as Koyuki grew more embarrassed by her stomach rumbling. I can't help being hungry. She yelled as she crossed her arms. The rest of the time seemed to pass by slowly as another 3 days went by. Slowly but surely the rest of the remaining squads made their way into the building, with both scrolls in hand. Kujira and his squad made it not long after Kamimura and the others had. Kujira was pissed that they had arrived before them, but after throwing a small tantrum, he soon changed his attitude once his squad opened the scrolls being reunited with their sensei. Haku and the others had never seen the man before, hearing Kujira call him Ryo-sensei. Kaga seemed to know him and exchanged a few words before they went their separate ways to focus on their own squads. Haku had counted 10 teams in total from the original 20 that had started the exam, and from what the instructors were saying, that was all that would be making it to the final phase of this exam. Now that everyone was present and accounted for, with the instructors having combed the forest for any who had been unable to complete the exam, dead or otherwise. With the information being confirmed, they could now move on with the exam, being asked to move into the large hall, lining all of the remaining squads up in formation. The hall they now found themselves in was very large with a lot of open space, with the most notable thing being the large stone statue of a hand seal right in the center back. Haku, Koyuki and Kamimura took a good look around at the other squads, seeing who had made the cut. 3 squads from the Hidden Leaf Village had made it through, no surprise there as they had the most genin taking part in the exam, meaning they had to at least have some worthy genin among the ones they had come across so far. One squad caught Kanimura's eye in particular as he noticed the symbol for the Uchiha clan on the back of a boy's clothing, knowing he would make for a challenging opponent. After all, the fame of the Uchiha was known throughout the world of shinobi. All 3 of the Hidden Mist squads had also made it to the final without struggling against anyone they had come across just yet. Haku had been able to observe some of Kujira's abilities that he had reported to the others, just in case. Itori's squad on the other hand still remained a mystery, but he was sure he would find out soon enough. Kamimura could also see that the squad from the Hidden Waterfall had made it, seeming unscathed. 2 squads from the Hidden Rain had also made the cut, with the last squad being from the Hidden Grass, all of which they had not encountered as of yet, knowing nothing of their abilities or jutsu that they could possess. That meant that each village had genin that had made it to the final exam, with their jonin sensei all standing by the sidelines, also weighing each other and their students up. Such was the nature of the world they lived in. Enko, who was the head instructor for the second part of the exam, stood at the front with the other instructors. She couldn't believe how many had made it through the forest to this stage. She had thought for sure that only 3, or maybe 4 squads would make it. She took a good look at the genin that stood before her, studying each of them to see what they had. This year's genin are certainly interesting indeed, she thought before she cleared her throat. Alright, quiet up, she yelled, getting their attention. Everyone looked to the front to see that Anko was about to speak, standing at attention and waiting patiently. Alright, you brats. She started. It looks like that many of you passed the second stage of the exam, that we have too many of you for the finals, she said with a smile on her face. Everyone broke out into whispers, confused as to what she meant. Suddenly a shadow appeared from the back of the hall, getting all of the instructors' attention as the figure came into view. Lord Hokage. Enko said in surprise as she suddenly bowed her head, not expecting him. Everyone else in the room bowed their head, with the genin squads following suit to show respect. Now, no need for that, the third Hokage said, giving a wave of his hand before he placed his pipe back into his mouth, taking a good look at the genin once he got to the front of the hall. Enko and the other instructors made room for him, and Enko gave him the floor, moving to the side so he could address the genin. Well done on getting this far. I know that it wasn't easy, and you have become a credit to your village and your sensei for getting this far, he said, giving them words of praise. However, the exam is not at an end as of yet, he said before blowing the smoke from his pipe out. As Anko has just said, there are too many of you who made it to this point for the finals. Therefore, we have decided that we shall hold an exhibition match beforehand. He shouted, getting everyone's attention. Now I want you all to give it everything you have got. Remember, even if you lose, that does not mean you have failed the exam. Now you have made it this far, it is no longer about passing or failing. It is now time to show us what you are made of, and if you have what it takes to become a Chunin. Everyone took in his words, thinking on them hard and becoming fired up at the thought of being able to show their true skill and power. Now everyone, if you will look to the large screen that is hanging above us. The third said as he pointed above them. Everyone looked to the large screen that was hanging down, seeing that it displayed all of their names for a short moment. Now, this screen will show the two that are picked at random to do battle. I wish you all the best of luck. The Hokage said before he passed them over to another instructor from the Hidden Leaf. The Leaf Jonin stepped out, thanking the Hokage before he looked over to the genin that was standing before him. My name is Shibi Abiram. I will be your instructor for this part of the exam. He said while everyone got a good look at him, seeing that he was dressed in a large cloak with his hood up and a pair of dark glasses on. Now allow me to explain the rules. He then said. During this exam, you will be allowed to use whatever jutsu and fighting ability that you wish. You may even kill your opponent if you so wish. He said with no emotion. The only rule you have to follow is what I say goes. If I stop the match, then that means the match finishes. One loses when they are either unable to fight, give up, or I end the match having decided on the winner. Is that understood? He asked, getting a swift nod from all. Very well, let's get the first match underway. He then said before turning to the large screen. Everyone else did the same as names started to spin in a lot, moving too quickly for anyone to see until they both stopped, revealing who would be battling first. Everyone started whispering as they read the two names, everyone looking to see who they belonged to. Very well, the first match is Hakuyuki of the Hidden Mist vs Akio of the Hidden Waterfall. The instructor said. Koyuki looked at Haku, punching him in the arm before giving him a thumbs up. You had better win. She then said with a smile. Can everyone else move to the spectating area, with the two fighters stepping to the front, Shibi said. Kamimuro nodded to Haku, who returned the nod knowing what he meant. With that Haku walked out to the front, getting a good look at his opponent. He had long brown hair with a cream-colored robe on, and his headband tied around his forehead. Koyuki and Kamimuro made their way to the standing area above with Kaga. The others also did the same as they waited to see what was going to happen. All of the other instructors in the Hokage also took their spectating area, also eager to see how the fights would turn out. Sir Toby took a good look at Haku, knowing that he was one of Fina's students and adopted sons. He had also learned that he was a member of the Yuki clan, and possessed the ice release. He couldn't help but smile as he felt excited waiting to see them both in action. This will be over quickly, Kaga said with a smile as he crossed his arms over his chest. Are you both ready? Shibi said as he looked at each of them, watching as they stood face to face. Yes, Akio said, looking a little nervous. Yes. Haku also said, flashing a friendly smile at his opponent. Alright, take your positions and await my signal. Shibi then said, letting each of them take a couple of steps back to prepare themselves. Come on Akio. You got this. His teammates shouted from the spectating area, their cheers not going unheard from both him and Haku. Alright, you two, Shibi said as he raised his hand into the air. Let the battle begin. Let the battle begin. Shibi shouted, slashing his arm through the air, as he gave the signal for them to begin. Haku stood still as he watched his opponent, standing with a smile on his face. Akio on the other hand pulled out two kunai, twirling them around before holding one in each of his hands, as he got ready to fight. Kaga and the others watched from the standing area above, all three of them excited to see how the battle would play out, with Kaga being most excited of all. Is everything alright, sensei? Kamimuro asked, noticing that he seemed a little tense. Kaga smiled, not taking his eyes off of his student. Kid doesn't miss a thing. He thought before giving him an answer. I'm just looking forward to seeing Haku go all out, Kaga said, getting Kamimuro to also smile. He wouldn't need to against his opponent. Kamimuro then said, turning back to the fight. Kaga knew how strong the three of them were to a point, having seen them in action on multiple missions and training exercises. However, Fina had told Kaga that Haku tended to hold back due to his kind nature, always saying that his true ability was indeed amazing, and once he shut off his emotion, he was a force to be reckoned with. I'm done standing around. Akio then shouted as he charged forwards, crossing both kunai in front of his face. Haku didn't even flinch as he waited until the last second, not even blinking as Akio sprang into action, aiming a cross-X slash with both kunai at Haku's face. At the last possible second, Haku ducked under Akio's right arm, spinning around with a perfect sidestep getting clear of him. It all happened so fast that only those with a very keen eye had even seen what really happened. What's he doing just standing there? Come on Akio, get him. Hina, another of the Hidden Waterfall, shouted, unsure why her teammate wasn't doing anything. It's already over, Hina. Her sensei said as he watched with his arms crossed, not seeming happy. She looked at him confused before turning back to look at Akio. Akio stood still with his hands by his sides as Haku turned to Shibi. It's over. he said before he started walking away. So it would seem, Shibi said, having already seen what had happened. Akio suddenly dropped to the floor, landing face first as he dropped both of his kunai onto the ground. Everyone who hadn't seen what happened was shocked, however, so was everyone who had. Shibi walked over to Akio, taking a good look at the senbon needle that was sticking out of his neck, noting the perfect placement of it. To hit the pressure point with such speed and accuracy without killing him. Remarkable indeed. Shibi thought as he pulled the senbon needle out with one quick motion. Akio's eyes suddenly opened wide as he jumped up to his feet, shocked at what was going on. Settle down. The fight is over. Shibi then said, announcing the winner to be Haku. What the hell was that? He didn't even touch him. Look at him, he thinks he's so cool. Kujira shouted, clearly pissed off. Didn't you see what he did, Kujira? Their sensei said, giving him a hard look. Make sure you don't let your guard down against him. He then said through his sharp teeth. Kujira and the others nodded, seeing that their sensei was being serious. Everyone else was also talking about what had just happened, seeing how it had ended so quickly and without warning. Even the Hokage was impressed at the demonstration of such fine skill. My. It would seem the Mizukage has trained his students well. He thought as he watched Haku from a distance. Haku had walked up to the standing area, regrouping with his own squad. That was amazing, Haku, Koyuki said with a big grin. But just wait till it's my turn, she then said with a cocky grin. Haku smiled as he rubbed the back of his head as he replied. I don't doubt it, he said. But what Haku, Kaga said, knowing he didn't even have to try in that last fight. Kamimura also smiled at him, knowing he would have no trouble. Alright, let us announce the next fight. Shibi then said once Akio had also returned to his squad. Don't worry, Akio, we aren't done yet. His sensei and other teammates said, giving him a pat on the back, trying to help him not feel so bad. Everyone turned their attention back to the large screen, as the names started to be shuffled at random before two were picked out. The second match will be Chika of the Mist vs Mushi of the Hidden Ring. Chika didn't look bothered as she continued to sip on her water bottle. Come on, Chika. Time to get fired up. Kujira shouted, hating the fact that she never let anything bother her. Yeah, I got this, she said as she walked away, lifting her hand up to shut him up. Don't worry about her, Kujira, Rakuro said, trying to calm him down. Mushi of the Hidden Rain also walked down towards the fighting area. He was tall with black spiky hair. He had a breathing apparatus on his face, like Hanzo. He also wore a full-length cream-colored bodysuit with his headband around his forehead. The two of them now stood face to face as Shibi announced the two of them, allowing them some space now to prepare for battle. Alright, you two, let the battle begin, he shouted, giving them the signal. Mushi didn't waste any time as he quickly started to form a bunch of hand signs. You never had a chance, he then said as his body started to phase in and out, becoming all wavy. Chika was very surprised and watched as his body sank into the ground, seeming to melt into it before he vanished altogether. Well, that's not right, Chika then said as she placed her water bottle onto her belt clasp. Suddenly 10 copies of Mushi solidified out of the ground, surrounding Chika with a kunai drawn. Nowhere for you to run, Mushi shouted as he threw the kunai at her, aiming for vital spots. Chika didn't bother moving and simply yawned as the kunai hit her body, sinking into her flesh as if they hit water. That won't work on me, she then said as she only counted 5 kunai, while noting 10 copies of Mushi. Also, your genjutsu is way too obvious, she then said as she let the kunai fall out of her body, allowing it to become solid again. Why I'll make you pay for that, Mushi said as he suddenly charged at her from all directions. Chika didn't bother looking, and instead closed her eyes while making a hand sign, focusing on her flow of chakra to break the genjutsu. Done, she then said as she opened her eyes again, seeing that the 10 copies of Mushi had become only 5, as she suspected. Chika suddenly let her legs turn to water as she dropped to hip height, avoiding all of the attacks from Mushi. Mushi was surprised and shocked as she broke out of his genjutsu and dodged his attack all at once. But not as surprised as when his clones were all disposed of by one quick circular swipe of her own kunai, bursting all 5 of his water clones. Chika stood back up to her full height, licking the water off her kunai, tasting it before taking a look around. Come out wherever you are, she then said, looking for her prey. Mushi had to be careful about revealing his exact location, while he tried to formulate a plan on how to attack her. He wasn't sure how she had negated his kunai attack, allowing her body to turn to water, but after seeing that he had devised that physical attacks, wouldn't quite cut it with her. Mushi decided to create more clones, hoping that he could devise a plan while he watched them battle her, trying to figure a way to beat her. However, Chika smiled, showing her pointed teeth. Found you, she said as she pointed her finger right at where he was hiding. Water pistol jutsu, she shouted, firing a shot at blinding speed that hit Miss high in the stomach, breaking his invisibility jutsu he had been using to hide. Mushi hit the ground hard, rolling a couple of times until he fell onto his back. All of Mushi's clones also burst and vanished, unable to take solid form any longer as he fell unconscious. The fight is over, Shibi shouted, announcing the winner. Chika smiled before unclipping her water bottle and taking a sip. Here go Chika, Kujira shouted as he flexed his bicep. Chika sighed as she watched him from a distance, continuing to sip on her water. Mushi was dragged away to the medical bay, leaving Chika to slowly return to her squad. Once clear, Shibi gave the announcement for the third fight, with all eyes falling once more to the large screen, as they waited to see who was next. The names started to slow down again, and 2 were picked, showing who was next to do battle, getting a surprise reaction from everyone. Next we have Homotum Unidao of the Hidden Grass versus Aseto Uchiha of the Hidden Leaf. Alright, next up is Homotum Unidao of the Hidden Grass versus Aseto Uchiha of the Hidden Leaf. Shibi announced, waiting for both fighters to come down from the standing area. The Hidden Grass Shinobi had a straight face, not giving any form of expression or emotion away, as he took his place on the fighting stage. Good luck, Aseto. Both of his team members shouted as they watched him walk away, blushing as he turned to look at both the girls. Thanks, but I don't need luck, he said as he gripped the railings with his left hand before vaulting over it and dropping down to the ground, landing in a superhero pose. He's so cool. They both shouted, acting like groupies rather than ninjas. Alright, are you both ready? Shibi asked, watching as the Uchiha took his place. Yes, they both said. Alright, take your positions, Shibi then said, giving them the chance to move back and prepare for battle. Kaga watched the Uchiha kid closely, having done his research on all of the genin in the exam this year, as were the instructor's rights to see the candidates entered in the exam. His name was Aseto Uchiha. 13 years of age, and of course could use the fire-style jutsu that all Uchiha were blessed with. Other than that, his grades had been good, top of his class, and his mission record had been steady. His opponent, on the other hand, was also 13 years of age, and was also proficient in fire chakra transformation. However, Kaga had not been able to find his grades or mission log. This should be an interesting matchup, Kaga then thought as he waited for the battle to start. Alright, begin, Shibi shouted, announcing the start of the match. Neither of them wasted any time in making the first move, as each of them started by throwing a volley of shuriken. The metal ninja stars cut through the air at great speed, before the sound of metal crashing against metal rang through the air. Fire-style fireball jutsu. Both of them suddenly shouted as they made the hand signs at the same time. Both of them unleashed their fire-style jutsu, letting the flames roar against one another, fighting and battling for dominance over the other, as the fire tried to consume itself. They were both equally surprised at what had happened, as well as realizing that their jutsu was also equally matched. The Uchiha wasn't happy and instead broke off his jutsu, quickly jumping into the air as he reached inside of his weapons pouch. Homotu watched as Aseto leapt into the air, his fire style taking full control, and crashing into the wall behind where Aseto had been standing. Aseto quickly threw another round of shuriken at his opponent, before he flipped in the air and threw some more. Homotu quickly jumped back and pulled a kunai from his own weapons pouch, using it to deflect the incoming shuriken. However, he had not seen the shuriken that Aseto had thrown behind him, assuming that he had simply missed and had not given it a second thought. He had not missed, he had in fact done this on purpose, and with excellent skill, used another shuriken to alter the trajectory of said shuriken to re-aim it at Homotu from behind him. Not take this, fire style. Homotu started. Got you, Aseto said, taking Homotu's attention as he landed on the ground. Not even looking up at his opponent. Homotu was too slow to react as he turned around, with the shuriken hitting him in the center of his forehead, deflecting off of his headband as he did. The force of the blow, however, had knocked him to the ground, having been strong enough to end the fight, looking as if he had been killed by the blow. Winner, Aseto Uchiha, Shibi announced, as the medics quickly ran over to Homotu to check him over. Aseto flicked his long black hair out of his eyes as he smiled. He never stood a chance, he said, acting cocky as both the girls on his squad cheered for him. With that all done, Shibi was about to start the name generator for the next match. However, a hidden leaf ninja ran over to him, whispering something into his ear. Shibi nodded and turned back to the audience before he made his announcement. Alright, you lot, listen up. We still have a total of 11 matches to get through, however, we will be taking a short break after the 5th match. So let's begin the next round, he then said as he turned to the screen above that started to shuffle through the names at random. Everyone looks at the large screen above, waiting to see whose name was next. The names came to a slow until finally, they stopped, revealing who would be combating. Alright, next up we have Sho of the Hidden Rain versus Hattori Toritomi of the Hidden Mist, he said, announcing the next fighters. Hattori smiled as he crossed his arms, turning and making his way down to the stage. Guess you don't need any words of encouragement, Miyako shouted as she watched him walk off, cool as a cucumber. Sho of the Hidden Rain tilted his large hat as he frowned a little, knowing this was going to be a tough match, as he watched Hattori make his way down. Kamimuro and the others were also eager to see Hattori's skills firsthand, watching him as he made his way to the center stage. Now both Sho and Hattori had taken their positions, with Shibi getting ready to announce their battle. Both ready, he said, watching as the two of them readied their weapons, with Hattori simply gripping the hilt of his sword. Begin, he said, not expecting Hattori to move as fast as he did. Sho gripped his large umbrella tight as he raised it above his head, about to unleash a jutsu of some kind. However, he didn't get the chance as Hattori was already standing behind him, slowly resheathing his blade after he had flicked the blood off of it. How? Sho said as his chest suddenly opened with blood spraying out onto the ground before he collapsed. Hattori finally put his blade fully back into his scabbard, allowing the clicking noise to ring through the hole. Quick raw style, he said softly as he turned to look at his downed opponent with pity. Match over, winner Hattori of the Mist, Shibi said, looking at him in interest. The medical team was on show as quickly as they could be, already getting the bandages ready to try and stop the bleeding. You would need many of those, his life is not in danger, Hattori said as he walked past them, letting them know that he didn't go for a killing blow. Something the medical ninja were astounded by due to the amount of blood. Kimimaro and the others were also impressed, noting Hattori's impressive speed and skill with the blade. Kaga especially, noting the skill and technique he had just used. Did any of you see what he just did? Koyuki asked, looking at Haku and then Kimimaro. Haku nodded in response, with Kimimaro turning to look at her. Could you not see his movements, Koyuki? He asked, surprised. What? You're telling me you could see what just happened? She said. Haku gave a light-hearted laugh, not realizing Koyuki couldn't see the movement. Don't worry too much, Koyuki, it's one of those moves that if you blink you miss it. Kaga then said, helping to make her feel better. However, Haku flashed a serious look at Kimimaro, when he noted before he looked back to Hattori, as he now recognized him as a full threat. Once the medical team had taken Sho away for treatment, the stage was ready for the next matchup. The names started to spin at random until they finally stopped once again as they revealed the next matchup. Alright, the next match will be Hana Inuzuka of the Hidden Leaf versus Gogi of the Hidden Ring. Gogi was a member of the second team of Rain Ninja. Unlike Sho's squad, Gogi's squad had yet to be chosen for a battle, as now Sho and Mushi of the Rain had been defeated. Both shinobi took their positions on the stage, looking each other in the eyes as they prepared for battle. Haku took a good look at the two of them, noting that Hana was a pretty girl, looking to be around 13 years old. She had long hair tied back in a ponytail, and two red fang-like markings on her cheeks. Gogi on the other hand had a yellow jumpsuit with a rebreather that had only one outlet on. The Rain Ninja seemed to look older than the Leaf Ninja, however, Haku knew that age didn't always mean one would be stronger. Both ready? Shibi asked as he looked at both Hana and Gogi. Yes, Hana said as she got ready. And Gogi said as he placed his hands into his pockets, seeming very calm. I'll take that as a yes, Shibi said as he lifted his hand into the air. Begin. He then shouted, giving them the signal to start the battle. Gogi didn't move much as he kept his hands in his pockets, simply watching to see what Hana did. Hana on the other hand jumped back to clear some distance, pulling a scroll from her hip. She did. What you got there? Gogi asked, seeming only slightly interested. You're about to find out. Hana shouted as she pulled the scroll loose, summoning whatever it was holding inside it, as a large amount of white smoke burst forth. Come on out, Himera brothers. She shouted as the smoke cleared to reveal 3 large wolf-like dogs. Time to rip you to shreds. Hana then said as the dogs surrounded her, with the dogs standing in an aggressive stance with one on each side of her and the last one behind her, all 3 of them snarling at Gogi. Well, this is going to be more entertaining than I thought. Gogi then said as he finally took his hands out of his pockets. Hana Inuzuka stood proud, surrounded by her 3 wolf-like dogs, as they glared daggers at the hidden Rain Ninja. Gogi, the set Rain Shinobi, stood with his hands by his sides, having taken them out of his pockets as he glanced half-heartedly towards his militars. This should be a little more interesting now, he said as he tilted his head to the side menacingly, with his voice sounding robotic through his rebreather. The crowd watched in apprehension as the 2 shinobi stood in a fierce face-off, both of them waiting for the right moment to make a move. Let's do this. Hana shouted as she commanded her dogs to attack, quickly joining their ranks as she dropped down low, charging like a wild animal towards Gogi. Gogi remained still, seeming as he watched Hana and her wolves charge towards him, not seeming distressed in the slightest. Well, I guess I had better make a move, Gogi said as he flicked his wrist, allowing a purple ball to drop from his sleeve into his hand. Hana noticed it in his hand, seeing that it was a poison smoke bomb, and quickly orders her dogs to retreat to safety, as she tried to throw a volley of shuriken at him. Your poison can't hurt me if I don't breath it in, she said with a smile. Gogi didn't move as the shuriken flew towards him, simply tilting his head to the side, as he let the ninja's stars pass his head by mere millimeters. Hana watched as he dropped the smoke bomb onto the ground, bouncing twice before it burst and released a poison gas, causing Shibi and the other exam invigilators to also take a step back away from the poison smoke. Gogi raised his hand slowly as the poison smoke rose around him, making a few hand signs very slowly, before his body seemed to disappear into the smoke. Hana and her ninja hounds waited and watched carefully as the smoke cleared, revealing no trace of Gogi's location. However, Gogi did not know that the Inuzuka clan had a tremendous sense of smell, and could track their prey by scent alone. Behind us, Hana suddenly shouted as she got a whiff of his scent from behind, quickly jumping out of the way of a volley of kunai that was headed right towards her. Not bad, Gogi said from behind her. Hana quickly pivoted in her heel as she spun around to counterattack. Her ninja hounds had already done so, having 4 legs they had been able to counter much quicker. However, Gogi quickly dropped another poison smoke bomb, fading back into the purple mist as he disappeared again. Hana took another low stance as she and her ninja hounds waited for the fog to disperse once more. He seems to be able to hide in his poison smoke, making getting close to him to attack difficult, Haku said as he watched from the spectating area. Yes, it seems that the only way to track him is by scent. Kamimuro then said, watching as Hana dodged another flurry of kunai landing back onto her forelimbs like an animal. Ninja art of beast mimicry, all fours jutsu. Hana said as her chakra seemed to flare to life, letting her features become wilder and her chakra more intense. Alright then. Time to do this. Hana said as suddenly all of her ninja hounds transformed into her, mimicking her perfectly, as the four of them quickly jumped around and mixed their positions trying to confuse Gogi. Her speed has increased drastically, Koyuki said, almost impressed at how animal-like she looked. Kaga agreed, having fought against the Inizuka clan in the past. The Inizuka clan are a clan that specializes in canine combat, forming an inseparable bond with their ninkin from an early age. They also share similar traits to that of the dogs themselves, having an extremely keen sense of smell, sharp claws and even sharper teeth. He said, enlightening his students on the subject. I see, Kamimuro said, not taking his eyes off of the battle. Hana was darting around as she continued to dodge round after round of kunai, seeming to prove more difficult to hit than intended. Fang over fang. Hana shouted as she hopped onto the back of one of the clones, the other sat doing the same with all of them suddenly turning so fast that became a blur of razor-sharp claws headed towards Gogi. Now. Nice doggies. He shouted as he dashed across the battleground, avoiding the first attack, watching them crash into the wall behind him. The second was now headed right for Gogi, forcing him to jump into the air, only just avoiding her attack. Hana and her clone stopped rotating and landed on the ground, skidding to a halt. Now. She shouted as the clone jumped into the air with Hana using the ninkin to boost her scent, allowing her to catch Gogi while he was still falling through the air. Nowhere to hide now. She shouted as she readied her claws for an attack. She caught him, Koyuki said, impressed at her swift movement and planning. Not quite. Kaga then said, having seen something the others hadn't. Gogi watched as Hana came hurling towards him as she flew through the air. You fell for it, he said, knowing that she would try and close the distance between them when he had nowhere to go. Gogi pulled what looked like a gas canister out from his weapons pouch, holding it in his hand as he extended it to meet Hana's attack. Shit. She thought, realizing all too late what he was doing. However, the damage was done as she hit the canister with her claws, causing it to burst and covering her in a poison cloud of smoke. Everyone waited to see what would happen as the smoke cloud covered both of them, restricting visibility for all outside of it. Movement suddenly caught everyone's eye as Hana flew out of the poison cloud on one side, landing a little rough as she skidded along the floor. Gogi dropped out of the other side, also landing on the floor and looking a little off. Hana tried her best to stand up to her full height, knowing that she had breathed in some of the poison. This isn't good. She thought as she started to stumble until finally she dropped to her knees. Her ninkin knew something wasn't right, and quickly all rushed over to her side, their transformations wearing off. Looks like the poison is taking effect, Gogi said as he watched from a distance. But I have to say, you put up a better fight than I expected. He then said as he looked down at his chest, seeing the claw marks she had left. Still, in the end, you never stood a chance. He said as he placed his hands back into his pockets. Hana could feel her vision going blurry, knowing that she could black out at any moment. Hana looked at her ninkin, seeing they were worried about her, whimpering as they could sense she was in a bad state. It doesn't matter if I black out, you three can take him, she said to them, giving the three of them one final command. The three ninkin all nodded as they understood their master's final command, before she dropped to the ground unconscious. All three of them turned to face Gogi, snarling and baring their fangs at him. Gogi seemed surprised as they turned on him, getting ready to charge even though their master had become unable to fight. I don't like hurting animals if I don't have to, but I won't hold back, Gogi said as he slowly took his hands out of his pockets once more. That's enough. Shibi suddenly said as he appeared between Gogi and the three ninja hounds. Gogi waited for a moment, but noticed that the dogs had backed off a little at Shibi's presence. Hana Inizuka is unable to continue. Gogi of the Hidden Rain is the winner. He shouted, annoying the end of the battle. Medics. Shibi then shouted as he knew there would be a limited window for an antidote to be used if she was to survive. Kneeling down beside her as he allowed some of his own inserts to crawl into her body and go to work on extracting the poison. Gogi placed his hands back into his pockets, seeing that the match was over, turning his back on them as he started to walk away. However, the ninkin were not happy with the result, and as their master had commanded, they were going to try and finish him for good. The three of them suddenly charged towards Gogi, snarling as they were about to try and rip him to pieces. Gogi turned around as he tried to react in time, not expecting the dogs to ling past the instructor. Whistle, that's enough. A gruff female voice that demanded respect shouted. The dogs suddenly stopped dead in their tracks, looking scared as they didn't dare move without a command. Everyone looked over to who had given the command, seeing a wild-looking woman who also bore the same marking as Hana on her cheeks, showing she too was a member of the Inizuka clan. She whistled once more, this time getting the three wolfhounds to turn around and retreat with their tails between their legs, without so much as a grunt, clearly being feared as the alpha. Everyone was surprised but also impressed as they watched the whole thing happen, noting that the woman did not look impressed in the slightest. Even Saratobi giggled to himself as he pulled his hat down over his face a little. That's Zoom. She never changes. He thought as he watched the ninkin return to her side, before the medics carted Hana off to treat her. Seeing that she was already improving thanks to Shibe's intervention. Once everything had calmed down, Shibe returned to the center of the hall so he could give his announcement. That concludes the 5th match, and as stated before, we shall hold a small interval before the next match is announced. No one seemed overly bothered by having a break, but welcomed the chance to rest regardless. Alright, the next match will be held here in half an hour, Shibe said, letting them all know. With that, all said and done, everyone seemed to go about their own way, with others simply remaining in their current spot, not seeing the point in moving. Others used the time to stretch their legs or head to the bathroom. However, Kimimura used this time to inspect the behavior of the other, making mental notes of things they did so he might be able to use it against them later. Haku wasn't all too bothered as he had already won his match, earning himself a place in the finals. Koyuki on the other hand used this time to eat something, not realizing how hungry she was after watching all of the matches so far. Kaga remained with him, however, soon took his leave as he had a small task that needed completing. "I'll be back soon," he said, taking his leave. Haku and the others didn't seem bothered and simply nodded as they watched him leave. Kaga headed into the back of the hall until he came to the entrance of the building itself. He headed outside into the forest, all while making sure no one was watching or following him, before he pulled out a small scroll from his weapons pouch. Kaga took one more look around to make sure no one was watching him, and once happy he opened the scroll and placed it down on the ground. The scroll had lots of writing on it, containing a seal of some sort. Kaga started to make a few select hand signs that unlocked the seal and activated it before he placed his hand onto the scroll. Slowly the air around the scroll grew colder and colder until it started to freeze, forming what looked to be a mirror, growing in size, until it was large enough for a person to walk through like a door. A moment or two passed as Kaga stood up, waiting patiently by the ice mirror's side until finally, it started to ripple as a foot passed through first, followed by the rest of its owner body. "Good to see you, Lord Mizukichi," Kaga said as he bowed his head ever so slightly. Faina stepped fully out of the ice mirror, placing his foot onto the grass beneath him, as he adjusted the tip of his Mizukichi hat with his thumb and index finger, allowing him to look Kaga in the eye. "So this is the Forest of Death," Faina then said with a smile on his face, taking a look around in awe as it looked just how he had imagined. "I'm looking forward to TK watching the remaining matches in person, now that I have taken care of business back in the village," Faina said as he turned to Kaga with a smile on his face. "Of course sir, allow me to show you inside," Kaga said, offering to lead him to where the matches were being held. Faina nodded. "Lead the way." Exactly 29 minutes had now passed, and everyone except for Kaga had returned to the combat area. Kaga's presence had gone unnoticed by all, except for Kimimura and the others naturally. Now that all the instructors were ready and could see that all of the genin were back, it was time to announce the next round of the preliminary matches. Shibe walked back into the center, having been given the nod of approval by the Hokage himself. "Alright everyone, it's time to announce the next battle," Shibe said, not caring if anyone was missing. "Where the hell is Kaga-sensei?" Koyuki asked as she placed her hands on her hips, clearly not happy that he hadn't returned in time. "I'm sure he's fine," Haku said, not feeling overly concerned about their sensei's well-being. Kimimura didn't say anything, and instead, he turned his attention to the screen, watching and waiting to see which names would be next. The names slowly came to a halt, and everyone took a good look at what the screen displayed. "The next match will be Suba of the Hidden Leaf versus Boten of the Hidden Waterfall," Shibe announced. Everyone looked to see who the fighters were as they made their way down to the battleground, coming face to face next to Shibe. Kimimura watched Boten with interest, remembering how he could have killed him with ease earlier in the exam, and wondering if maybe there was more to him than met the eye. He also took a good look at the Hidden Leaf shinobi Suba. He was tall and seemed older than most here, having a bald head with his headband tied around his forehead. His clothing was simple, but he had a serious look on his face that meant business. "Are you both ready?" Shibe asked, seeing how each of them had their game faces on. "Yes," they both said. "Alright then, begin," Shibe said, announcing the start of the battle. Suba the Leaf didn't waste any time, pulling a set of kunai from his weapons pouch on his leg and charging forwards. Boten kicked back off the ground, taking a couple of steps back, as he tried to get some space to react. Suba threw the first kunai, aiming for Boten's face. Boten was able to dodge the attack, having been lucky to see it coming before he pulled out his own weapon, and blocked Suba's reverse slash. Both Boten and Suba fought for dominance as their fists shook and strained, each of them pushing as hard as they could, as the kunai ground against one another, sparking from the clash. Suba was the first to pull back, causing Boten to almost fall forwards, as he wasn't expecting him to move just yet. Suba used this to his advantage. Quickly he ducked down, letting his knee land against the floor, pressing his weight forwards and shooting in, placing his back leg to the side of Boten, and suddenly grabbing him around his waist with his free hand. It was an excellent technique performed with perfect timing, allowing him to gain the advantage with his taijutsu ability. Boten was slow to react, but was just able to lift his own kunai, as he stopped Suba from slashing his throat. Having allowed him to take his back, he had now found himself in a tricky position indeed. Suba used his free hand to place Boten in a chokehold, while continuing to push down with his kunai, going for the kill. Boten was using both hands now as he tried to hold his own, shaking from the effort he was using, as Suba's kunai came closer and closer towards his neck. No use fighting it, just give up. Suba said as he continued to pull the kunai down towards Boten's neck, intent on ending him. I won't give up, Boten said as he struggled, doing his best to try to pull Suba's wrist away. There's only one way out of this. You die. Suba said, feeling that he was winning the struggle. Boten could see the tip of the kunai was almost at the end of his nose, going cross-eyed as he focused in on the razor's short tip. I can't lose here, I won't lose. He shouted as he suddenly found a reserve of strength, using it to overpower Suba and prise his arm away from him. But how? Suba shouted in shock, trying with all his might to pull the kunai back down and finish the job. Never. Boten shouted as he quickly used one of his arms to ram his elbow into Suba's ribs, breaking them on impact, and getting a howl left pain from Suba. I won't surrender. Boten shouted again as he grabbed Suba's wrist, twisting it and placing him into a tight shoulder lock, as he swept the kunai from his hand, placing it against his neck, as he pinned the leaf ninja to the ground. I win, Boten said through heavy breathing, ready to use lethal force as Suba tried to break free. Everyone watched remain silent as the struggle had taken a sudden turn of surprise. All except for Boten's squad who cheers for him as loud as they could. Shibi watched as Boten held Suba in the shoulder lock, putting more pressure on the joint, as Suba refused to say anything, simply grinding his teeth as he tried to bite through the pain. Do you surrender? Boten asked, digging the edge of the kunai into his neck, cutting the skin and drawing blood. Suba didn't have a choice. He had let his guard down, and now he was suffering the consequences. I surrender. He said, finally giving in as he could no longer bear the pain. Boten sighed in relief and slowly let go of his arm, also pulling the kunai from his neck, as he turned to look at his teammates. Alright, I did it. He shouted as he raised his hands into the air, getting a round of cheers from his squad. Alright, Boten. Woo. We knew you could do it. They cheered. Winner, Boten of the Hidden Waterfall. Shibi announced as he watched the medics come over and help Suba up, carting him off to be treated. Boten headed back over to his squad, the three of them jumping around like kids as they celebrated his win, while everyone else remained quiet. Alright, that concludes the 6th match. Let's draw the names for the 7th. Shibi said as he turned to the screen above. Everyone did the same once again and waited for the names to come to a stop, shocking a few of the genin who watched. Next match will be Koyuki Karatachi of the Hidden Mist vs. Miyako Kato also of the Hidden Mist. Shibi said as he announced the next match. Both Koyuki and Miyako turned to look at each other, glaring daggers at one another, before each of them whipped their hair out of their face, turning away and breaking eye contact. Koyuki, be careful, Haku said to her, knowing this could be a dangerous matchup. Koyuki didn't seem bothered with his concern for her and blanked him. I'm going to end this bitch, Koyuki said with a serious scowl. Don't be too hasty now, Koyuki. Remember to keep a level head, Haku said, trying to get through to her. Kamimuro decided not to say anything, knowing that his words would only piss her off even more, and instead gave her a simple nod. You got this. Koyuki returned his nod and then headed down towards the battle arena. Where the hell is Kaga-sensei? Haku said as he took a look around, still not seeing any sign of him. I don't know, but all we can do is watch and support her from here, Kamimuro said as he crossed his arms, spotting a look from Hitori from across the room. I know, I just don't want her to lose control. Haku then said as he stepped towards the railings, gripping them with both hands as he watched her from above. Both the girls were now standing on the battleground, glaring at one another from the other side, neither of them coming any closer. Shibi could already tell there was tension in the air between these two, and he knew it was going to be some sort of grudge match. I can see you are both ready. But remember the rules. What I say goes. He said to remind them before he got ready to start the match. Alright, B. Just as he was about to announce the fight, Shibi's words stopped as the doors to the exam hall opened, revealing a rather imposing guest. Everyone turned to look at who had entered through the door, wondering who could be so important that it would interrupt the start of the match. A tall man dressed in a blue cloak stood in the doorway with a hat similar to the one the Hokage wore, except this one was blue, and had the kanji for Mizukage on it, getting a surprised gasp from everyone who noticed. Well, looks like I made it just in time, Faina said as he raised his Mizukage hat, allowing his face to be seen by all. The entire hall burst into a murmur as they realized who it was standing before them, especially those genin from the Hidden Mist, who had a much more excited expression on their faces. It's Lord Mizukage, Kujura shouted in enthusiasm. Everyone was still chattering amongst themselves as Faina walked towards the center of the hall, seeing both Koyuki and Miyako standing there with a shocked look on their faces. Looks like I made it in time, Faina said as he gave the two of them a simple wave, sensing the tension between them. Faina carried on walking past them, heading over towards the Hokage and the other instructors. Good of you to join us, Lord Mizukage, the Hokage said with a smile coming to his face, even though he had not been expected. Faina could tell that the Jonin and Chunin surrounding the Hokage were nervous and on guard. However, after seeing the Hokage's reaction, they seemed to relax a little. My apologies for dropping in like this, Lord Hokage. However, I was able to finish business back in the Hidden Mist, and couldn't resist the temptation of watching some of the exam matches, Faina said as he approached Tsurutobi. Please Lord Mizukichi, it's not a problem at all. Please join me. The Hokage said, extending his offer to Faina. Faina smiled, gladly accepting his offer, and swiftly disappeared and reappeared next to the Hokage, getting a good look from above at the battleground. Everyone in the exam hall was still in shock. Not only was the third Hokage watching the matches, but now the fifth Mizukichi too. It's Faina-sensei. Haku said as a large smile came to his face. Kamimura was also excited as he thought about showing his skills off to him. After all, both Kamimura and Haku saw Faina as a father figure, and the chance to impress him would not be wasted if it presented itself. Once everyone had calmed down with the arrival of Faina seeming to rile everyone up, Shibi was finally able to proceed with the next match. Don't think that just because Lord Mizukichi is here I will go easy on you, Miyako said as she placed her hand on her hip. Koyuki frowned. It's a good job he is, that way he will be able to stop me from killing you. She then replied, getting a raised eyebrow from Miyako, who was not impressed. We'll see who the one to die is soon. She then said as she turned her back to get some distance before Shibi announced the start of the match. Meanwhile, Faina chatted to the Hokage about the matches that had already taken place. Kaga had filled him in on what had gone on so far, telling him Haku and the other genin of their village had won with no problems so far, something he was most pleased with. I have to say Lord Mizukichi, your genin are exceptionally skilled. Each of them has proven they certainly have what it takes to become Chunin so far, he said as he took a puff on his pipe. Faina was unable to hide the smile on his face before he replied. Thank you, Lord Hokage, I'm glad to hear that you think that, he said before taking a closer look at Koyuki, being able to feel the anger coming from both her and Miyako. Kamimura and Haku stood at the top in the spectating area above as they watched Koyuki get ready. Kaga-sensei, you're back, Haku suddenly said as Kaga approached the two of them with his hands in his pockets. Yeah, sorry about that, I had a little errand to run, he said, flashing them a smile. Alright, you two. On my command, Shibi said as he got ready to start the match. Koyuki and Miyako both took a ready stance as they waited eagerly for him to give the word. Both twitched as they could feel their hands already reaching for a weapon. Everyone watching could feel the tension in the air, as everyone held their breath waiting for the match to start with not so much as a pin dropping in the silence. Begin. Shibi shouted as he waved his hand, finally starting the match. Both Koyuki and Miyako charged dead ahead, not wasting any time whatsoever as they lunged towards each other. Each of them threw a handful of shuriken towards the other while charging ahead, neither of them slowing down from the threat of the razor-sharp ninja stars. The shuriken collided in the air, giving off sparks as the two kunoichis smashed against one another in a heated exchange of taijutsu. Miyako didn't waste any time as she jumped in with a roundhouse kick aimed at Koyuki's head, raising her leg with expert skill as her foot sliced through the air. Koyuki shifted and ducked under the kick as she sidestepped before counter-attacking with the right straight. Miyako slipped a punch and blocked the left body hook that was aimed at her liver with her elbow, using the force of the block to push off from to get a little distance. Koyuki followed, pressing in on the attack, as the scales had shifted to her side. Quickly she placed a hand on the ground to support her body weight, allowing her to put all her strength into a low sweep in an attempt to knock Miyako's legs from under her. However, Miyako was quick and jumped into the air, avoiding the kick with good timing. Something that Koyuki wasn't happy about as she snarled, pressing back on the attack with relentless effort. However, Miyako jumped backwards, doing a back handspring that propelled her into the air, allowing her to throw a handful of kunai as insurance for cover. Koyuki jumped back also, avoiding the first two kunai as they hit the ground. Quickly she pulled out her own kunai, twirling it around her little finger as she deflected the last kunai, the sparks licking her cheek as the kunai ricocheted, giving her a close-up on screen as it folds next to her. Boom, Miyako said as she landed on the ground, flicking her head back Black Widow style. Koyuki had somehow failed to notice the paper bomb that was wrapped around the hilt of the kunai, watching in slow motion as the tag ignited ready to explode at next to point-blank range. The explosive tag exploded, creating a large amount of smoke and debris to suddenly flare up where Koyuki had been, obstructing everyone's vision of her, as they waited to see what had happened. Miyako waited patiently, watching for any sign of movement that could come from the debris, becoming ever clearer as the dust started to settle. Suddenly a bundle of small fireballs shoot out of the smoke, traveling at speed towards Miyako, and quickly bursting as they each changed direction, making the jutsu harder to avoid. Miyako jumped back into the air as she made a series of swift hand signs. Water style, wild water wave, she said as she suddenly sprayed a large amount of water from her mouth to counter the fire style. The fire and water clashed, bursting and creating thick steam as they mixed into the air. The fog covered the area, obstructing everyone's vision, Miyako's included, as she landed back on the ground, trying to use all her senses to find Koyuki. You really think you can use the silent killing on me? Miyako said as she slowly reached her hand back, sliding it into her weapons pouch and drawing a kunai. Koyuki suddenly burst out of the fog, slicing down with the kunai, having aimed for the top of Miyako's skull. Miyako was able to lean backwards, putting a lot of pressure on her lower back and avoiding the assault, quickly pulling herself forwards to throw a counter slash aimed to Koyuki's throat. They're both going for the kill, Haku said as he watched from above with the others. Kaga sighed with his hands in his pockets. In these exams, people dying is a common occurrence. he said without emotion, almost as if he was speaking from experience. Koyuki and Miyako were locked in a vicious knife fight, as each of them slashed and thrust their weapons towards the other, parrying, blocking and dodging each other's attacks before throwing their own in rapid succession. Koyuki slashed downwards, watching as her kunai passed by the side of Miyako's head as she moved out of the way. Koyuki adjusted her attacking angle, flicking her shoulder and wrist as she suddenly slashed to the right, aiming at her neck. Miyako had slipped the first attack and shifted her weight to her back foot, allowing her to lean back and block the slash that followed, redirecting the attack and allowing her to press the attack. Koyuki's knife hand retracted back to her body as she flicked the kunai into a reverse grip in her hand, allowing her to block 3 rapid thrust attacks one after the other from Miyako, all aimed at her midsection. Koyuki could tell she was going for vital points such as the liver, spleen and the gap between the third rib leading to the heart. Koyuki deflected the third thrust, doing her best to push Miyako away, as she took a step back with her right leg, trying to anticipate where her next attack would be aimed at. Shit, she's going to attack my left shoulder, it wide open. Koyuki thought as she had kept her knife head just a little too low after the last block. Miyako stepped in to close the gap between them, seeing the opening in her opponent's guard as pressing forwards. However, Miyako was not stupid and instead of attacking her open point, something she expected Koyuki to expect, she instead dropped her weight through her legs, suddenly going low and slicing through across the inside of Koyuki's thigh. Arg. Koyuki screamed as the cut sank in deep through her flesh, almost cutting the femoral artery. Koyuki pulled her leg back and counter-slashed down with a wild blow, something that Miyako was easily able to avoid by stepping back and giving herself some space. "Got you," Miyako said as she slowly stood to her full height, lifting the kunai to her mouth as she licked the blood from the blade menacingly. Koyuki knew she wouldn't be able to move properly now, having had the muscles sliced on her inner leg would affect all of her movement, leaving her feeling trapped and angry. Final watched from atop the spectating area with the Hokage, who also seemed rather interested in their battle. "This is proving to be a tense battle," he said, not taking his eyes off of the two. Final nodded in agreement. "I didn't expect them to hold this much resentment against one another, something must have happened earlier in the exam," he said with a small chuckle. "But still that girl, Koyuki was it? She looks to be in trouble," the Hokage said, knowing that with a gash like that on her leg, she wouldn't be able to move around much. "Yes, but it's not her that I'm worried about anymore," Final said as he lowered his head and closed his eyes for a moment, getting a questioning look from the Hokage. "It's over for you now, Koyuki, nowhere left to run anymore," Miyako said as she slowly lowered herself into a fighting stance, like a cat ready to pounce on her prey. Koyuki could feel the blood pulsing from her leg, slowly running down her leg as it leaked onto the floor. Blood, she thought as she looked down at the ground. "My blood," she said in her head, reaching her hand and touching it, seeing the fresh red that now covered her hand. "You ready to die?" Miyako said with a sinister smile, thinking that Koyuki had already lost the will to fight. "She's done," Kujiro said from the sidelines as he and his squad watched. "I didn't expect her to be pushed so hard," Chika said as she took a sip of her water bottle, each of them watching with interest. Haku and Kamimuro also watched from the sideline, seeming worried as Koyuki took the blow to her leg. "Not good, she got her," Haku said as he gripped the rails. Kamimuro also had a worried look on his face, knowing what was about to happen next. "My blood," Koyuki said once more, before the light from her eyes slowly disappeared, turning dark and cold. "Not good," Kaga also said as he watched the sudden change in her eyes, remembering the last time he had seen it happen. "The Kuritachi blood," he then muttered, waiting to see what she did next. "Time to finish this," Miyako shouted as she rushed forwards, raising her kunai for the kill. "Die," she shouted as she thrust her kunai towards Koyuki's throat, ready to finish her off permanently. Koyuki's dark cold eyes watched as the kunai came closer and closer, getting within an inch of her throat before her body moved. It was as if she had become possessed, moving almost unnaturally as it twisted at an angle allowing her to avoid the blow. Miyako was shocked that she had moved at the last second, having already fully committed to the strike, and being unable to do anything as Koyuki countered with a kunai that was about to puncture her own throat. Miyako's eyes went white as she watched Koyuki's merciless eyes reflect her own horror, watching in almost slow motion, as the kunai moved so fast she couldn't react. "No. I don't want to die like this," the words echoed through her mind as the final moment came upon them. Suddenly a hand grabbed Koyuki's wrist, stopping it dead in the air, not a hair's length away from Miyako's throat. Everyone held their breath, not having even seen who or what had been able to move so quickly as to stop her attack. Miyako could feel the sweat run down her chin before it dripped down and crashed to the floor, seeming to restart her heart that had jumped to her throat. "I think that's enough, Koyuki," the person responsible for stopping her said, looking down at both of the girls. Final was stood over both of them, holding Koyuki's wrist, even as she continued to fight his grasp, still trying to reach Miyako with a serious bloodlust. "Lord Mizukichi," Miyako said, shocked as she took a small step back, not believing that she was but a second away from death. Shibi and the other instructors were also astounded. They had not even seen him move, knowing that none of them would have even been able to get close to stopping what should have happened there. "That's enough, Koyuki, the match is over," Final said, still holding her wrist as she struggled against him. "Kill, I need to kill." She suddenly screamed, the horror on her face twisting and warping, as she turned her attention to him, getting ready to attack. Faina sighed, quickly jabbing his finger into her neck, rendering her unconscious. Sorry Koyuki, but it's time for you to take a little nap, he said as he caught her before she hit the ground. Koyuki. Haku and Kamimuro shouted as they both jumped over the railing and rushes over towards her. Faina looked at Miyako and flashed a reassuring smile. It's all over now Miyako, why don't you head back up and be with your squad for now, he said, getting a slow nod from her in response. The Hokage watched from the sidelines, also impressed at how fast Faina had moved. I haven't seen anybody move like that since Minato, he thought as he pulled his hat down ever so slightly. Faina, sensei. Kamimuro and Haku shouted as they ran over towards him. Now boys. You know you are to address me correctly out in public, he said as he smiled at them. Sorry, sir, Haku said, looking at Koyuki with a worried expression. Don't worry boys, she will be fine. Let's get her to the medical so they can tend to the wound on her leg, he said before Kaga also appeared, joining his students. Can I leave that to you, Kaga? Faina asked as he looked at him. Of course sir, he replied, taking Koyuki off of him and heading over to the medical ninja that was waiting for them. Well, I think we have caused a scene long enough. Sorry about that, Faina said as he looked at Shibi. Shibi was still wary of Faina, having seen how fast he reacted to the situation. It's no problem sir, he replied. So this is the Ice Devil of the Mist, Cage Slayer and 5th Mizukage, he thought as he watched him carefully. Come on boys, let's get out of the way so we can get on with the next match, Faina said, getting a nod from both of them, as they followed him out of the exam hall and into the corridor. Now that the situation had been resolved, Shibi was finally able to announce the next match, calling the next two fighters up to the stand. Meanwhile, Faina and the boys headed off to check on Koyuki, seeing that she had been treated by the medics and was now resting. I need you both not to worry about Koyuki, and instead focus on your exam. After all, there are some tough genin this year, Faina said as he ruffled both of their hairs. The boys smiled and gave him a nod, each of them wanting to make him proud. I hear you already won your first match with these Haku, he then said, having been told by Kaga himself. Haku smiled, yes sensei, he said in response with a large smile forming on his face. Good, I know you will both do great, he then said as he grew more serious. Alright, boys, why don't you head back through, I need to have a chat with Kaga for a moment, he then said. Kamimuro and Haku understood and did as he asked, knowing better than to try and eavesdrop on their sensei. Faina waited for THS boys to leave, and then turned to face Kaga, who already knew what he was about to ask. Everyone was still talking about what had just happened, having watched an intense fight that was about to result in instant death, only to be stopped by the Mizukage himself, was enough to spark a conversation alright. Miyako was still shaken up from the look in Koyuki's eyes, as she headed back over to her squad. Are you alright Miyako? Her sensei asked, knowing she was a little rocky. Yeah. I'm okay sensei, she replied before she looked at Hattori. You did well Miyako. But you let your guard down, he said, not making eye contact with her. Yuri remained quiet as she kept her face hidden underneath her scarf as usual, not having much to say. Whatever, it's done now so just watch. Besides, you should feel honored that Lord Mizukage saw fit to spare your life, Hattori said. Now Hattori, no need to make her feel bad about this, Ayaka said. You fought well and with pride. You shouldn't look down upon yourself, after all, Koyuki is the daughter of our former Mizukage, and is a very dangerous shinobi for her age, Ayaka-sensei said, helping to make Miyako feel a bit better. Meanwhile, Shibi took center stage once more now that things had calmed down. After careful analysis of the fight past, the instructors had decided to call it a draw. Although no intervention was allowed by anyone outside of the exam coordinators, an exception was made due to it saving a life, and also the fact that it was a Kage who had done so. Therefore the match was declared a draw, and the announcement was given for the next match, with the screen above starting to shuffle the names. Alright, next match will be Gaka of the Hidden Grass versus Murataka of the Hidden Leaf, he said, waiting for both fighters to make their way to the battleground. Meanwhile, Faina and Kaga were still talking in regards to Koyuki and what he planned to do with her. I knew that there was a chance of this happening, Kaga said as he placed his hands in his pockets. Faina sighed, knowing all too well that the Karatachi blood was known for this. I've only seen her like this once before on a mission. She lost it and killed every enemy in her path. It's as if a monster lurking within her comes out, Kaga said with a small chuckle. I mean, it's not exactly a bad thing, Kaga then added. After all, a shinobi needs to be able to kill without letting their feelings get in the way every now and again. Faina also nodded. Yes, however, it is always better to have control over that power, he said as he looked at the sleeping girl. When she enters these blood-fueled traces, she fails to recognize between friend and foe. I'm worried that one day she might kill someone she cares for, and I know what it would do to her, he said. Kaga agreed. What is it you're thinking then? He then asked as he looked into his eyes. I'm going to place a series of mental barriers, a form of sealing jutsu as such to help her remember who she is, if she ever gets like this again. Kaga raised an eyebrow. You mean like a jinjutsu to control her bloodlust? He asked. Not control. I don't imagine this is something we can control, but something she must learn to accept as she grows. These metal barriers will be placed in stages, as a form of sealing jutsu at the very last stage. If the first and second stage fails to snap her out of it, the final stage will render her unconscious. Fina explained. Kaga nodded in agreement while also being very impressed at the same time. Leave it to you to be able to do something like that, he said as he rubbed the back of his head. However, I will only have time to place the first seal, as it is not a quick process, Fina said looking at Koike. Kaga nodded. Can I do anything to help? He asked. For now keep an eye on Kamimuro and Haku, make sure they are right. I'll handle things here for now, he said as he dismissed Kaga so he could get to work. Kaga nodded and turned around, heading back towards the exam hall. Kaga arrived back to see Haku and Kamimuro standing watching the matches. Hey, so what did I miss? He said as he caught their attention. Sensei, you back. Where is Koyuki? Is she okay? Haku asked, still worried about her. Don't worry Haku, Koyuki is fine, Kaga said, trying to put his mind at ease. Kamimuro stayed quiet as he turned back to watch the match, still worried himself. The 8th match had resulted in a draw with both ninja knocking each other out once they ran out of chakra, having to result to a slugfest of that led to exhaustion. The 9th match was currently underway with Yumi of the Mist, and a member of Team Hitori was fighting against Hina of the Hidden Waterfall. The match was rather one-sided though, as Yumi was clearly the stronger of the two, being extremely precise with her attacks, but she used senbon needles to slowly stop Hina's movements. Not good, at this rate Hina won't be able to move, Boten said as he squeezed the railings. What the hell is with these Mist Shinobi, how are they so strong? He then said as he gritted his teeth. Hina was currently struggling as she pulled another senbon needle out of her left shoulder. She hit the pressure point again. I can't move my arm now, Hina said, knowing she wouldn't be able to use hand signs now. Yumi stood tall with the bottom half of her face hidden by the blue scar she always wore. She had 3 senbon needles in between her fingers and walked towards Hina slowly. I think it's time that you surrender, she said with her quiet voice. Hina however was proud and refused to surrender, even if it meant death. I'm not done yet, she shouted as she threw the senbon needle at Yumi, quickly pulling a kunai and charging at her to try and do some damage. Yumi easily blocked the senbon needle, deflecting it with another in her hand as Hina jumped in, slashing with her right arm downwards. Yumi stepped back easily dodging the attack, then sidestepping to the right as she dodged another upwards attack, before she kicked Hina in the knee to take her off balance, as she grabbed her wrist and knocked the kunai out of her hand. How are you going to fight without the use of both arms? She then said as she stabbed Hina's right arm with another senbon, once again hitting the pressure point and disabling her arm, letting it drop to her side. Hina screamed in pain as she stepped back before she threw a roundhouse kick aimed at Yumi's head. Yumi was surprised but quickly ducked under the kick and countered with a push kick that knocked Hina over, causing her to fall on her back. Hina once again bit through the pain and slowly stood back up, spitting blood out of her mouth. Why do you continue to fight when you know you cannot win? She asked as she pulled her scarf up a little more. Hina was breathing heavily now and still had a defiant look in her eye. I fight because I was always told to never go back on my word, she said as she took a step forwards. I won't give up, she said again, taking another step. And I won't ever surrender, she finally screamed as she charged in, ready to give it her all in one final all-or-nothing attack. Yumi didn't say a word as she watched Hina charge towards her, watching as she pulled a wire with her teeth that was attached to her body. Hina had hidden a large number of explosive tags under her shirt like a vest. Yumi knew that she intended to go out with a bang, quite literally, and planned to take them both out if she couldn't win. However, Yumi would not allow that, as at the last second she threw a senbon with great accuracy, breaking the wire in half and preventing the explosive tags from igniting, causing Hina to look at her in shock. You would really try to kill us both so that you don't lose, Yumi said softly as she watched Hina continue to charge at her, even though her attack had failed. Yumi sighed before his face became angry, something that both their teammates had not seen very often at all. You stupid bitch, if you want to die so badly then let me give it to you, she suddenly shouted as she charged at her, punching her in the face over and over until finally, she fell to the ground. That enough. The match is over, Shibi shouted, telling her to stop. However, Yumi didn't stop and quickly took a mounted position on her chest, as she hit her again and again, staining her knuckles red with her blood. Hina. Both Boten and Akio shouted as they quickly rushed to her aid, both drawing kunai with the intent to kill Yumi in Hina's defense. However, before they could even get anywhere near her, Hitori had appeared and grabbed Yumi's wrist, pulling her off of Hina and standing between the three of them. That's enough, Yumi, do you want to get disqualified? He said, giving her a sharp look that snapped her out of her daze. Boten and Akio knew they didn't stand a chance against Hitori, but they were not about to let their teammate be treated like that and do nothing about it. I said that is enough, Shibi suddenly said as he now appeared between them, stopping both of them in their tracks. Move another inch and you will all be disqualified and sent back to your villages. I mean it, don't push me, he said, getting angry. All of them could feel the pressure coming off of the Jonin and knew he was no joke and could easily squash all of them at the same time. Of course sir, Hitori said before he turned to Yumi, getting her to do the same and heading back up to the spectating area, almost dragging her with him. Both Nanakio had stopped for now, and quickly turned their attention to Hina, rushing over to her side. Her face was a mess, and they could hear her wheezing, as she did her best to breathe through her broken nose and jaw. "Move aside and let the medics do their work," Shibi said to both of them as he looked at the damage. She held back until the very end. The girl's words must have struck a nerve. He thought before he turned around. "She will be alright, now get back to your spot and out of my arena," Shibi said with a serious tone once again, finally getting things settled. "She really didn't hold back then," Haku said with a straight face, looking at Hina's face from the distance. Kaga rubbed the back of his head as he looked at the girl himself. "Geez, everyone seems to be letting their emotions get the better of them today. Not very shinobi-like," he then said, looking at both of the boys, who also returned his look. "Alright, it is now time to announce the final fight of the preliminary round," Shibu said as he got everyone else's attention. There were still quite a few genin that had not had to fight as of yet. In fact, there were still 12 candidates left who could be chosen for the final match, and all of them watched intently. The names continued to spin on the display screen, until they eventually started to slow down, and finally stopped, leaving everyone shocked. Next and final match, Kamimuro of the Hidden Mist versus Kujira of the Hidden Mist. Alright, the final match will be Kamimuro of the Hidden Mist versus Kujira Mishigaki of the Hidden Mist, Shibi announced. Both Kamimuro and Kujira glanced at each other from across the spectating area, with Kujira giving him a serious glare as fire burned in his eyes. "Be careful, Kamimuro," Kaga said as he crossed his arms. Haku also smiled and turned to face his brother. "Good luck, Kamimuro, try not to kill him," he said with a smile. Kaga sighed, knowing that's what he meant when he said to be careful. Kamimuro nodded to both of them and turned to make his way down. "I will. Watch out for this guy, Kujira," Chika said, seeming worried. "Don't worry about me, I'm gonna pulverize that guy and wipe that expression clean off his face," he shouted as he grabbed his bicep. Bakuro, his other teammate, also seemed worried. "Watch out for this guy, Kujira," he said, remembering his abilities from the academy. "Not you too, Akuro, I told you, I'm gonna kill this guy, so don't sweat it," Kujira said, still feeling confident as he looked to his sensei. "Ain't it that right, sensei?" he asked. The squad's sensei, Ryo, stood with his arms crossed as he seemed deep in thought. "Don't underestimate him, Kujira, otherwise you will pay for it," Ryo said with a serious look on his face, seeming to make all of them tense. "With that said though, go and unleash your power and don't back down," he then said as a smile replaced his serious expression. Kujira felt even more fired up now, having been permitted to unleash his power by his sensei, knowing he finally no longer had to hold back. With that, both of the genin made their way down to the battle arena, while everyone else who was still left did their best to get a read on their strength. With the end of their battle, assuming one was victorious, there would be a total of 16 finalists going through to the next round, a number that had not been expected, and something that had not happened in a long time. Shibi watched as both of the genin made their way to the area, finally squaring off against one another, as they looked into the eyes of each other. Shibi could sense that both of these boys were much stronger than most of the others here. It seems that this year's candidates are proving to be very troublesome individuals indeed, especially from the mist, he said to himself, knowing he wasn't the only one who was thinking it. The Chunin exams was a great way for the hidden villages to allow their genin to gain experience in battle, as well as build relationships with the other nations. However, it had a greater use, one much darker, as it allowed each village to gauge the talent and strength of their future shinobi, making a note of who could be a potential threat in the future. And this year, all eyes were currently on the village hidden in the mist. "Alright, you both know the rules, prepare yourselves," Shibi said as he watched them. "I hope you are ready to have that expression wiped from your face," Kujira said, looking down at Kamimuro as he towered over him. Kamimuro didn't reply and instead kept a blank expression, pissing Kujira off even more. Kamimuro turned around and took a couple of steps back, keeping his arms by his side, as he waited for the signal for the fight to begin. "Alright, let the match begin," Shibi said, watching as Kujira suddenly charged forwards, not wasting any time. "Take this," he roared as he pulled his fist back before unleashing all of his power into a right hook. Kamimuro was quick to move on the defensive, ducking under the hook with relative ease. Kujira didn't stop there as he quickly unleashed an assault of taijutsu against him, throwing punches and kicks with amazing speed and agility for someone his size. Kamimuro was impressed. The fact that he had to focus to dodge and block each attack made him realize that Kujira was strong indeed. Kamimuro ducked under another roundhouse before leaning back and stepping to the side as he dodged a spinning heel kick. Kujira was impressed at his speed, seeing as he had dodged all of his attacks so far, noting that he was quicker than himself. "Let's see you dodge this," he shouted as he pulled out a handful of kunai and threw them at Kamimuro, charging at him at the same time as he used them to create an opportunity. Kamimuro dropped to the floor as he placed his weight on his right hand to avoid the kunai. Watching as Kujira jumped in and threw a barrage of karate-style punches at him. Kamimuro slipped the punches without having to block until Kujira did something he did not expect, throwing a feint attack with his right leg as he pretended to go for a kick. Instead, he used his leg to change stance and drive all of his weight forwards, as he threw two punches at the same time, one to the head and one to the body, taking Kamimuro off guard. "Yamazaki." He yelled as he unleashed his technique, forcing Komimuro to block the body shot as he moved his head to the side. Komimuro was suddenly propelled across the room as the body punch made contact with his forearm. Everyone watched as he sailed through the air before he flipped and landed back on his feet, where he slid across the floor. "Got you," Kujiro said with a smirk as he lowered his hands to his hips, slowly sitting into a horse stance. Komimuro didn't realize that he had so much power behind his fists, and could feel that the force had broken his arm, looking at the bruise on it to confirm. Komimuro slowly stood back up as he allowed the bone to mend, willing it to knit back together, before he took a look at Kujiro, as he seemed to be preparing himself. Komimuro could see that he was planning something as he took large breaths in one after the other, seeming to absorb the air around him. "I don't know what he's doing, but I had better not let him finish whatever it is," he said as he allowed his fingertip bones to push through his skin. "Digital shrapnel," Komimuro said as he fired the bone bullets across the hull, watching as they headed towards their target. Kujiro could see the projectiles heading towards him and focused his chakra, getting ready to take the blow rather than dodge. He not moving out of the way. Haku said in surprise as he watched, waiting to see what happened. The bone bullets hit Kujiro all over his body, with a few missing him and smashing into the concrete behind him, doing massive damage to the wall. To Komimuro's and everyone else's surprise, Kujiro was still stood strong, with the bone bullets having been ineffective against him. But how? That attack should have shredded him to pieces, Haku said. Kaga was also taken back by how strong his body was, looking at the damage that the bone bullets had done to the wall behind him. Komimuro stood in a relaxed pose, not allowing this to take him off guard, as he watched his bone bullets drop to the ground harmlessly. "That wouldn't work on me. My body is harder than steel," Kujiro shouted as he pulled his robe off, exposing his upper body to everyone. From the outside he looked rather fat, seeming to have a large round shape to him. But now everyone could see what he really looked like. He was solid and looked to be as thick as a tree trunk, with his large toned muscles that covered his entire body. "I've spent years building my body to make it as strong as steel. As long as I am in this state, you won't be able to harm me," he shouted before he took another large breath in, focusing his chakra through his body once more as it started to change color, becoming a blackish that looked like some kind of metal. "Sekujutsu, body hardening," Kujiro said as he finished his breathing, allowing all the skin on his body to become the black metallic looking substance. Komimuro frowned a little as this time he readied both hands. "Let's put that to the test," he said as he jumped into the air, unleashing a storm of bone bullets, shooting round after round at him. Kujiro remained in his horse stance, unflinching as he was bombarded by the bullets, each of them bouncing off of him, as if they had hit bulletproof glass. "I told you that wouldn't work," Kujiro shouted as he suddenly charged towards Komimuro, seeming to move at a much faster speed than before. "What the?" Komimuro thought as Kujiro closed the gap on him fast, attacking with serious power. Kujiro threw a right straight that Komimuro only just moved out of the way of. He then attacked with another punch that Komimuro had to block, this time reinforcing the bones in his arm, so they didn't snap. Kujiro was surprised he had blocked his attack without taking damage, but quickly used this to make his next move, grabbing Komimuro's robe with his left hand, and quickly pulling him over his shoulder, as he attempted to slam him into the ground. "It's over," he shouted as Komimuro sailed clean over his shoulder and was headed towards the ground. However, Komimuro wouldn't make it that easy. "Arg," Kujiro shouted as he was suddenly forced to let go, quickly jumping back as he looked at his hand to see it was bleeding, even though the black substance his body was covered in. Komimuro flipped gracefully in the air and landed on his feet before he lifted his head up to look at Kujiro, who looked at him in surprise. "What are you?" he said as he watched the bones from Komimuro's shoulder retract back into his skin. "So you are a monster," he said as a smile appeared on his face. "Seems you're more like me than I thought," Kujiro said as he took a fighting stance, letting his chakra flare to life. However, Komimuro didn't share his excitement as he just slowly pulled his robe away from his torso, exposing his own upper body. "You are nothing like me," he said as he allowed bones to grow from all over his body, giving him a frightening look. Everyone watched in horror as Komimuro revealed his KekkaiGenkai, showing them his true self. "What the hell is that?" Chika shouted as she watched from the sidelines. "That can't be normal," Bakuro also said as he gripped the railings. Ryo also watched before explaining it to his students. "That boy is one of the last surviving members of the Kekkaigen clan. Like Lord Fifth himself, he possesses a deadly KekkaiGenkai, one that has been feared in the land of water for generations," he said, getting an alarming look from both the others. "So what if you can do some weird shit? I bet I can break all the bones in your body, no matter how many you try and make," Kujiro shouted as he charged forwards, getting ready to slam his fist into Komimuro's face. Meanwhile, the Hokage also watched from the spectating area as Komimuro grew bones around his body. "So that is the KekkaiGenkai of the Kekkaigen clan. A frightening ability indeed," he thought as he paid close attention. Komimuro lifted his arm as he allowed 3 bones to spring out, acting as a shield as they absorbed Kujiro's punch, only cracking a small bit, causing Komimuro to increase their strength of them. "I can control the osteopaths in my body, allowing me to create new bones anywhere at will. I can even control the density of my bones and forge them to be harder than steel. No matter how strong your punches are, you will not be able to break my bones," Kamimuro said as he stared into Kujira's eyes with a lethal expression, putting him on his back foot. Quickly Kamimuro pushed his arm aside and swept his free hand that now had a bone blade in it at Kujira's head, planning on finishing the battle once and for all. However, Kujira refused to back down. He has spent so long training, put so much time into his taijutsu ability over the years, never coming across something he couldn't punch through with enough hard work. He had forged his body into a shield and constricted his fists into spears with nothing but sheer hard work. I don't accept that. He suddenly shouted as he blocked Kamimuro's arm with a karate-style block. I can break anything with these fists. He roared as all of the black around his body suddenly concentrated at his fist. He unleashed his right hand, putting all of his power into it, aiming for Kamimuro's chest with a perfect karate-style 360 punch. The punch hit Kamimuro in the center of his chest, and even with all of the bones he had grown in the area to defend himself, the punch had still broken through, cracking them all. Everyone watched as the punch hit, taking Kamimuro off his feet as he sailed through the air, spinning violently before he crashed into a wall, delivering a large rumble that echoed through the exam hall. Kujira was panting heavily now as he had put all of his power into that final strike, watching as the black substance around his fists started to fade. He did it. A crow shouted as he cheered from the sidelines. Yeah, he did it. He won. Chika also shouted as he couldn't see any sign of Kamimuro. Both Kaga and Haku were also surprised as they had watched Kamimuro get smashed into the wall. That's not like him, Haku said as he watched from above, seeming worried. Kaga also nodded, feeling the same way as Haku. What is he thinking? Kujira could feel that his fist had taken damage as he lowered it to his side and stood back to his full height. His body hardening technique used a large amount of chakra, something he had a lot of thanks to his clan's heritage. He could also focus that chakra into any part of his body to make it harder, using it on his fists to make them as strong as steel. However, using the technique burned a lot of energy, and concentrating it all into one part of the body used even more. Kujira looked at his hand, seeing that his knuckles were bruised. He knew that by his fist taking damage that these bones of Kamimuro's were no joke, as he couldn't remember the last time his fist had been hurt. He's not done yet. Kujira then said as he looked at the debris cloud, sensing that the fight wasn't finished yet. Meanwhile, Kamimuro was still stuck in the wall, having taken the full force of the blow to his chest. His ribs had been cracked, and the external bones he had produced had also been broken. However, thankfully he had reinforced his sternum, allowing it to absorb all of the damage and leave him mostly unscathed. Still, he had to admit that Kujira wasn't a simple opponent, and not someone he could best without getting serious. With that, Kamimuro freed himself of the stone prison around him, and dropped back to the ground before walking back into view of everyone. The crowd erupted into a whisper as no one could believe he had taken such a punch and walked away seeming unharmed. Hitori and his squad also watched as they examined his abilities. Seems the kid is a real monster, Miyako said as she watched with her arms crossed. Their entire squad are freaks. She then added with a snarl. Hitori simply watched as he tried to come up with ways to defeat him and overcome this defense that he had, knowing that he would pose a danger in the future if they were to fight. That was a strong punch, alright. In fact, you managed to break my bones, Kamimuro said as he looked down at the broken ribs. I guess it's time to get serious now though. He then said as he pulled a bone blade from his shoulder and allowed the rest of his body to produce a layer of bones that covered his entire body in spikes. Kujira was worried now, knowing he didn't have the chakra to stop Kamimuro's attacks or do enough damage to break through his defense. I won't give up, he said as he resorted to pulling a set of kunai from his weapon pouch. No way he's using kunai, Chika shouted, knowing that Kujira never resorted to using weapons in a fight. This isn't good. I knew Kamimuro was strong, but I didn't know he was a monster, Bakuro said as his grip tightened around the rail. Kamimuro started walking towards Kujira now as he lowered his blade to his side, keeping it low as to hide its range. Kujira was on his back foot now as he waited for Kamimuro to press on the attack, knowing that this would take everything he had. Kamimuro suddenly ran towards him, seeming to move much faster than he had done before, quickly thrusting his bone blade towards Kujira's face. Kujira was able to deflect the attack at the last second with his kunai, but struggled to do so with the rest. Kamimuro continued to thrust his blade in an intense flurry, cutting Kujira on the cheek and other areas on his body, as he failed to block the attacks fully. Shit, he's too fast, and this blade thing is seriously sharp, Kujira thought as it passed by his cheek again, cutting him. Kamimuro suddenly stopped and lowered his blade, getting a surprised look from Kujira. What the hell? Why are you stopping? He shouted, getting angry as he felt as if Kamimuro was getting bored. This fight is over, Kamimuro said as he allowed the bones around his body to go back inside. What? I told you I'll never surrender, Kujira shouted as he raised his kunai to attack with. Kamimuro suddenly swiped his blade down, letting the tip just brush past Kujira's face, as he watched his kunai split in two, with a cut forming on his eye. You have exhausted your chakra and are no match for me now, Kamimuro said, causing Kujira to get angry. I don't want to have to kill you, so please surrender, he said. Kujira was almost shaking with anger now, infuriated that this punk was doing this to him. You really think I'm not a threat to you, Kujira said softly, making it hard for Kamimuro to hear him. You'll hear orders. He overloaded his fist with chakra once more, aiming it for Kamimuro's face as he went for the finishing blow. However, Kamimuro was still serious and had already predicted something like this. Quickly he ducked and spun around, placing the edge of his blade against Kujira's throat. "You act like any quartered rat would, making your movements too obvious to read," he said as he pressed the blade into his throat a little harder. "Now surrender." Kujira couldn't believe it. His final attempt had failed, making a fool of himself, as he lowered his head in shame. "That's enough, Kujira. Give up and fight another day," Ryo suddenly shouted from above, getting all of their attention. Kujira bit his lip and had to fight tears back as he felt like a failure. "Live to fight another day. And become even stronger," Ryo shouted again, getting his student to nod in acceptance. Kamimuro lowered his blade as Kujira finally admitted defeat, allowing Shibi to announce the winner. "Winner, Kamimuro," Shibi shouted as the final match was now over. "You were really strong, Kujira. If you had hit me with your full power from the start, you would have beaten me," Kamimuro said as he extended his hand. Kujira couldn't believe how friendly he was being towards him, even after all of the abuse he had given him in the lead up to this battle. Being forced to swallow his pride, Kujira extended his hand, taking Kamimuro's and giving him a toothy grin. "You beat me this time, but next time I won't lose," he said, giving Kamimuro his full respect. "I don't doubt it," Kamimuro said, returning his smile. With that said and done, both of the genin returned to their squads, each getting praise where it was earned. "You had me worried for a moment there, Kamimuro. How come you let the fight drag out for so long?" Haku asked, knowing he could have finished it much quicker. "No reason, I just wanted to see what he could do," he said. Kaga laughed at the response, knowing that no matter what he said he wouldn't listen anyway. "Well, considering you took that hit like a champ, I would say congratulations is in order. For both of you," Kaga said, smiling at his students. Now that the last fight had been decided and all of the battle complete, Shibi handed over to the Hokage who took center stage. "Well done to all that have made it to the final round. I can confirm that the second stage of the Chunin exams is complete," he said, watching every one of the genin's reactions. "However, for the winners, there is still one more part of the exam left, a final and third round, that will put you to the ultimate test," the Hokage said as they all listened to him carefully. "More will be announced on that at a later date. For now, I believe you have all earned some well-needed rest. You may leave and take rest when you see fit, as the orders and details for the third exam will be given in 2 days," he then said, allowing those who were ready to part ways and leave the hall. "Alright, you two, how about we hit the road and get out of this place?" Kaga said. Both Haku and Kamimuro agreed. However, Haku couldn't help ask about Koyuki. "Don't worry, Lord Mizukichi has taken her to be treated. He told me to tell you she is fine, and they will meet with us back at the apartment," Kaga explained. They both nodded, seeming more relaxed now at hearing Koyuki was alright. "Alright, let's get out of this place," they then said together as they turned to take their leave. And that concludes this episode. If you enjoyed it, I'd seriously love it if you guys could leave a like on the video, as it genuinely helps out so much, and it keeps me going, plus it takes only 1 second. That said, have a wonderful day. Hunt ahead. Salute.